said, whatever, I'll do it. Keep me out of trouble.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this first budget hearing of FY24 for the Finance Committee. I'd like just to take a moment and introduce three new Finance Committee members. To my right, we have Wally Teipert. Welcome. To my left, we have Aaron McLaughlin.
Good job.
And to my very far right, we have Arthur Skarmas. So welcome, all three of you. We're excited to have you. And with that, I'll turn things over to Steve Bartha to begin the overview of the budget presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To my far left, we're joined tonight by Select Board Member Gardner Trask, representing the Select Board. To my immediate left, did I say right? I meant left. I am better at numbers than I am directions. Jen Breaker, Assistant Town Manager, and to my right is Rodney Conley, Director of Administration and Finance. In the audience tonight, we have representatives from the schools and the library who will be presenting their budgets shortly. But first, we will do an overview of the budget that the Finance Committee received this past week, which looks like this. I do note something is going on with the microphones tonight. We have some town meeting members in the room. If you haven't received yours in the mail yet, and you would like to borrow one for the evening, you can. Rodney Conley insists that they be returned to him by the end of the night because they cost $27 each, and we cannot issue more than one to each town meeting member. But we do have a few extra copies if anybody wants to follow along. But they are in the mail. They went in the mail this week to town meeting members. So. What is going on with this technology? So on the screen is the process. We don't really need to spend any time on that other than to point out the budget process does not start in March. It starts in the fall, and really it's a year-round process. At any given time, we're working on 3 different fiscal budgets. We're working on the audit to close out the prior year. We're managing the current year, and we're preparing for the next year. So it's a constant effort and cycle, and so this shows where we are in terms of approving the FY24 budget, but budget really never ends. Before we get into the budget overview itself, there are a couple of slides tonight that we pulled from the Financial Summit, which we'll go through its plan for later this year. But the first 3 slides are really meant to provide just some context for the budget, sort of the context setting for the budget process. You see a snapshot here looking 10 years ago versus the most recent year that we have our audited financials for. What this shows in the blue is that the tax levy represents about 3/4 of our operating revenue. That is very consistent across the Commonwealth. It is not necessarily consistent across the country. There are parts of the country where the majority of local revenue comes from sales tax, like in Colorado, natural resources, like in North Dakota and Texas. And depending on where you are, I mean, those funding streams are more or less rigid and resilient. And property tax tends to be a very rigid and resilient property tax or tax revenue source. But really, as you can see, not a lot changes budgetarily in terms of the statutory framework in the Commonwealth. The second slide, these are the communities that we typically use when we do our financial summit. These are communities that are comparable in size, our regional peers in terms of neighbors, or have similar forms of government. For example, Andover and Danvers both passed their town manager acts within a year or so of each other in the late 1940s, early 1950s. And the forms of government are very similar. The per capita income in Andover is higher, but the form of government is quite similar to Danvers. So this shows the average property tax bill for a single-family home in Danvers is a little over $7,000, and this is putting that into the context in terms of the region. We like to think that we offer a pretty good bang for our buck between our electric rates and our property taxes for the services we provide, but it's a constant balancing act. So we look at the revenue sources, we look at the property tax context, and the third slide shows sort of where the budget dollars have gone 10 years ago versus the most recent year. This is a pretty busy slide. Just a couple of takeaways, though. Really, there are 3 budget areas that have increased proportionally in the last 10 years. One is retirement, and our retirement system is governed by PEER Act, so it's a defined benefit plan, and the state has a full funding date that it sets for the town and has oversight over the town assets and resources. That has grown from 4.9% to 7.2% of the budget in the past 10 years. That's roughly a 47% increase in terms of budget allocation. The Danvers Public Schools is up 1.2% over the past 10 years, and Essex Tech is up close to 70% over the last 10 years. It's a small part of the budget, but in terms of budget percentage, it has increased more than any other area. And as you can see, kind of working around the chart, I'm not going to read them all, but each of the other areas has contracted slightly, and that makes sense. As one area of the budget is consuming more, there is less of the pie for the other pieces. So in terms of the budget that we've put together that you received this evening, we always start by talking, before we get into the departmental details, we talk at a high level, what are the budget drivers, what's driving the budget this year. We have some familiar friends here and some new friends. Retirement contribution, we talked about that the Danvers retirement system is governed by PIRAC. We have averaged about 8% per year increase there. That's based on a biennial actuarial study that tells us how much we have to set aside to fund our unfunded liability to make sure that we're fully funded by 2035. Our healthcare trend has been a little bit lower the last couple of years. We were averaging about a 5% per year increase before we started a 2-year process working with our unions to redesign the health plan. That essentially reset the trend for us. We had a year or two where our increases were between 0 and 1%. We're back up north of 4%, and that's consistent with the trend that we're seeing in medical and prescription drug across not only the Commonwealth but the country, so that is starting to climb again. Danvers Public Schools, the 3-year average is 4.3%. Essex Tech, the 3-year average is 11%. And the real driver this year, which is now, we have an agreement in place, we have a contract in place going into next year, but we're looking at a 60% increase in our trash and recycling contract. We have joked at times that we forget that before COVID, the collapse of the recycling industry was one of the major issues facing the Commonwealth, and a lot of towns and cities were struggling to figure out what they were going to do. We were in a contract, a long-term contract with JRM. The timing of that was very good. We had very competitive rates. We had requests every year to reopen that contract and renegotiate, and we declined. We knew that this is the year that was going to be challenging, and it certainly was. But the budgets that you received included an estimate, and based on the 4 proposals that we received from regional vendors, the budget is in balance. There will be some changes to the way that we do collection in Danvers, and we'll get into that detail when we have the Public Works Director here tomorrow night to go through the Public Works budget. But what you'll see here, when you add up all of these increases that we are looking at in terms of budget drivers, they actually exceed the $2.8 million growth that we have for both the property tax levy and new growth. And how can that be? Well, we're going to talk a little bit when we get into some revenue. You'll see in your budget books that we've had to increase our local receipts. We've historically been very conservative in our approach to those non-tax levy revenue categories, in part because positive results there are how we fund things like police cruisers and plow trucks in the following year. That's how we build our reserves. So the budget is in balance, but we've had to make some adjustments this year to account for several of the drivers. We haven't mentioned special ed yet tonight, but that's one of the drivers that we'll spend some time tonight talking about that presented a unique challenge this year in the budget process. Before we get into the departments also, we like to talk about the snapshot here of our key reserves. These are the core of our financial policies. The Select Board adopted in 2019 a comprehensive set of financial policies governing almost everything that we do with respect to our finances. That coincided with an upgrade of the town's credit to AAA. And so we pay close attention every year to these reserves as we're preparing the budget and thinking about how the spending plan will impact key categories. So the first is free cash. This is a number that gets certified each year by the state, and it's a combination of the General Stabilization Fund, which is several lines down, as well as revenue that was collected beyond target or spending that came in below budget. We had a sort of a high watermark last year, and that was driven by a couple of different things. The town's health, the town is a member of the Mass Interlocal Insurance Association. We have Blue Cross Blue Shield as our insurance, but we're a MIA member. And Maya offered a 1-month premium holiday to all of its members last year. We had budgeted for 12 months, so we only had to spend 11/12 of our benefits budget. That 12th month flowed directly to free cash. That was more than $1 million. We're still coming out of COVID, where we've had federal stimulus and really aggressive reimbursement from our accounting department. So the free cash number was good this year, and that was helpful because we had to use an outsized portion of that to tackle special ed out of district this year, and also maintain some of our reserves. The free cash after appropriation, we have a financial policy. It's in the notes there that coming out of town meeting, we keep 1% of our net operating revenue as a holdback in case there's an unforeseen issue during the year. That's a pretty common policy. So 1.67 million is projected to be left out of the 8.3 coming out of town meeting this year. The debt stabilization fund, we've been drawing that down as part of a planned drawdown. As we finished the Smith School and loaded that debt into the debt curve, we were using debt stabilization to smooth that. And then the general stabilization, it's a modest increase this year, but there's been a policy goal each year to try to grow that to the point eventually it will be the primary portion of our unassigned fund balance. Currently, we rely on year-end surplus. The stated goal is to try to grow that it will be the lion's share of that. OPEB trust, the town's been funding OPEB, which is other post-employment benefits, which is really just retiree health care. We've been funding that since I think 2007, and we converted it to a trust 4 or 5 years ago so that we were able to invest it and start to earn a real return on it. And so the $13 million is a small fraction of the total liability, but it is a much larger number than a lot of communities have, and we've also seen our liability drop a little bit in the last couple of years, both through a policy that the select board adopted, indicating that when our pension system is fully funded, they will redirect the appropriation toward retiree health care, which the actuaries were able to use to adjust their valuation. And also, there's an inverse relationship between bond rate and the assumption you can make on the unfunded portion of your OPEB. So when the economy starts to slow down, your liability drops. So we'd much rather see our liability sky high and have a good economy, but when the economy slows down, you do see your liability drop as well. And the unassigned fund balance, that's an audited number each year. Over the last 5 or 6 years, our stated goal has been 8 to 12%. We exceeded that this year, in part because of our free cash number. Unless there's another premium holiday next year, we certainly would expect that number to drop back down. And GASB's actually coming out with revised guidance in terms of what that number ought to be. So we may be coming back with some recommendations for the select board in terms of adjusting that policy at some point in the next year or so. As we approach the budget this year, there were 3 sort of broad year-specific goals. The select board has a set of standing goals, but we've started adopting budget year-specific goals. The three goals that were adopted in December, one was to negotiate and navigate the process to put in place a new trash contract. We went through a competitive bid process this spring. We had 4 regional vendors at the table providing numbers. David Lane and Rob Dever in our Public Works Department were able to refine those numbers several times. There will be some changes coming. We'll be going to automated collection starting in July. There's a warrant article recommendation to procure the bins for the automated collection. The alternative was to have either the provider amortize the cost of those in the contract or to charge residents directly. And the recommendation was that we use some of the free cash certification this year to provide that first set of bins. The second overarching goal was to work with the schools to try to navigate really an unprecedented increase in our out-of-district special ed costs that we've seen over the past few years. This is an issue that is acute, but it's also affecting a lot of towns and cities. The governor proposed $75 million in supplemental spending in her supplemental budget, try in part to offset something we'll hear about a little bit later, which was the 14% rate increase that the state approved mid-year for the facilities that are providing these services. And there are several articles at town meeting that will seek to address this. And then the third goal was generally just looking at the inflation that we've seen. We've seen a lot of supply chain issues in our departments. We've seen a lot of service contracts go up, and so we're close to $1.3 million, including the $850,000 increase for trash and recycling this year, is related to contracted services or utilities. And so the budget is balanced. It addressed each of these three goals, but these were some of the issues that really made it a less than normal budget cycle. And at a very high level, this is the budget. The total non-electric, non-utility budget increase this year is 4.78%. That is the real budget increase year over year. We always provide some footnotes. One of the things that we wanted to draw attention to in this summary is that of the 4.8% school budget increase, everything above 2.5% is related to out-of-district special education costs. So the level service budget for the schools is about 2.5%. The library budget is down. We did not cut the library budget. The library director made some recommendations in terms of rearranging staff. So there's been a consolidation of some part-time staff into full-time, so the benefits for those positions are reflected in the town budget. It looks like a budget cut on paper. When you strip out the trash, utilities, and contract cleaning, the 6.3 budget increase for general government, everything north of 3.88% is related to those three categories. And so when we hold these things constant, which obviously is just a theoretical exercise because the costs are real, the budget increase notwithstanding special education and trash this year is about a 2% budget increase. So we talk a lot about level service. We're not increasing services. We're not cutting services. The level service budget this year represents about 2% of the 4.8% increase that the budget contains. Switching over to the revenue for just a second, 3.23%. We usually budget each year we anticipate about $600,000 in new growth. That's for the aggregate value add from all of our building permits or new certificates of occupancy and home starts. So it's about a 2.5% levy increase along with $600,000 in growth. That is the 3.23%. State aid this year is up considerably. The vast majority of that $1.63 million increase was the governor following through on a campaign commitment, which was to fully fund the Student Opportunity Act, which had been passed in 2019 and was partially funded the year that it was enacted. And really that state aid number that came out toward the end of the budget process was the difference between having to make some difficult cut decisions and having a balanced budget when accounting for the special education costs. Local receipts are up 10%. We talked a little bit about the free cash number, and we talked about the way that year-end surplus is used in Danvers to fund future capital and future reserves. The increases that you see here in the room tax and the meals tax, et cetera, are bringing us, we're sort of back to the pre-COVID trend, but we are much close, the budget to actual is now much closer than it was pre-COVID. And that's important because the $1 million increase in local receipts in this year's budget is $1 million that will not be in next year's free cash number. And so you sort of every time you increase your non-tax revenues, you're borrowing against future free cash certifications. The reduction in other available funds is driven largely by our reduction in the amount coming out of the debt stabilization fund as the Smith School debt sort of comes online. That's a very high-level overview, and I'd be happy to answer questions about anything that I just covered before we turn it over to the departments.
Great. Paul, anything?
Yeah, Steve, how often are we evaluated for the AAA rating? Is that every year, or is it, it is?
We usually, it doesn't need to be every year, but we're typically in the market, whether we're rolling bond anticipation notes or issuing new debt every year, so normally we get reviewed annually.
Right, okay. And I'll hold another question about SPED and the use of free cash till later on. What is our goal to fully fund OPED, and at what point? Is it 2035 or is it further out than that?
The pension, the pension has to be funded by 2035. So the retirement, PIRAC and the state have said towns and cities have to be fully funded for their pension plans by 2036, and our goal is 2035. There is no requirement to be fully funded for OPEB. It's a lot easier to calculate pension benefits than it is to calculate the future cost of healthcare. So there is no mandate per se, but there is an expectation that towns and cities are making an effort to set aside funds toward that.
is there a set figure that you're looking to get to by that year? Or
Not-
is that too flexible to,
What we've committed to, we have a 5-year plan where we increase the contribution by $50,000 each year into the OPEB trust. And the policy that the board passed last year was a future commitment to redirect, once the pension plan is fully funded, to redirect the dollars that are funding our unfunded liability for pension over to the OPEB.
okay. And the last question I have, if I heard you correctly, was that, well, let me ask you another. Have we settled on a contractor for the trash?
We have.
We have. Is that available, or will we be holding off on the announcement on that?
We had a press release that was,
I might have missed it, yeah.
we finished the press release yesterday and today, and it will be out tomorrow morning.
So I didn't miss it, okay.
No, you haven't missed it.
Okay, and then, if I heard you correctly, the trash pickup barrels, town meeting will decide to fund pick up the cost. Is that what we're asking town meeting to do when it comes to, so the resident is not gonna have to incur that, we're not incur that cost?
Correct.
What is the
Well,
co-
indirectly.
Probably?
Indirectly, indirectly they will.
They will, yeah, but,
Yeah.
right, okay. What is the cost of two, I imagine it's 2 barrels, right? One for trash, one for recycling?
So when David Lane is here, he'll get into the weeds on that.
I'll hold
But I
off
will
on
tell you, at a very high level, we'll be purchasing around 40,000 bins, and it's around $980,000 total cost for the 40,000 bins.
I remember a couple of years ago, I asked David about that process. He said, well, we don't want to do that. That's very costly. But here we are.
Here we are.
Yeah, okay. That's it for me. Thank you.
Mike?
Do we have the, I was looking through it, do we have the current total indebtedness on the general government side, not the supported?
I was gonna spout out a number, but Ronnie's gonna look up the actual number, so.
And then to go along with it, what percentage of that is under what we would determine to be traditional financing in which there's a high amount of principal paid at the beginning, and then which part of it is the less traditional that we've engaged in over the last couple of years? Do we know that number?
The majority of the general government debt is level funded debt.
Is level
Yeah,
funded?
the last 2 major projects, the high school and the Smith School, were level funded.
Level funded, okay.
I was right, $94 million
Okay,
in total debt.
And how much of that is the high school and the Smith School that's level funded?
And- Yeah.
And you don't have to, because we're gonna get to
We're gonna
that, yeah.
cover the debt,
We're gonna go,
not
just so you,
tonight, but we'll have that.
yeah, then, and also, I'm gonna be interested to see what our capacity is going forward. I know we're gonna discuss that in some depth, but.
Ted?
So it sounds like the trash barrel thing will be a warrant article discussion that we should say, I should say for that.
Well, you
time.
should, we should have the conversation when David Lane's here tomorrow night.
Okay.
Because the contract that we negotiated is for the collection.
Yep.
And the automated bins, we're gonna get funded one of 3 ways. Either the company was gonna buy them and then amortize the cost in our annual, in our tipping fee. We would pay cash for them, which we felt was we'd rather just buy them directly than let them finance them and charge us for them.
Yeah.
Or the third was to have either the town or the hauler send a bill to your house to pay directly for them.
Okay.
So the warrant article is to buy the bins that are associated with the service that David can explain, or not explain, but talk, can answer questions.
Was there any discussion of stepping away from the barrels, absorbing the increased trash costs via like a annual trash disposal fee?
I think that was discussed at length many years ago. It has been mentioned as an option the last couple of years, but it hasn't been, it was not explored as part of this. But certainly we could calculate what that would be.
Okay. That's it for me.
Can I just,
Yeah, go ahead, Mike.
so in that respect, so in honest, if we look at it, we've got an annual increase of about $800,000, and we're gonna have a one-time payout of about $1 million for this. in order to be able to pay for people's rubbish bins. Can we find out what the percentage of communities, how they handle the rubbish bin issue? Thanks.
Aaron?
I'm all set for now.
Okay. Wally?
I'm good. I'll just email you tomorrow. I'm
Eric?
good for now.
Fine.
Arthur? Great. Question on state aid. I know the governor has announced some grand increases, but I also know the governor's budget can sometimes be pared down once it gets to the legislature. How confident, I know, and I think we're estimating 11% covered by state aid. I guess, number one, what's your plan if we don't hit that number? And I know our representative from General Court is here. If she would happen to like to speak to that at all, she's certainly welcome to. But I'll let you go first.
I don't want to put Sally on the spot. I will say, traditionally, the governor's budget generally is the starting point. It only goes up from there. So that it would be out of character unless a recession should materialize quickly. Past practice would suggest that the governor sort of sets the floor, and then the legislature will commonly increase it. But I wouldn't.
Sally,
I
did you
know
want
Sally doesn't speak on behalf of the entire legislature. I don't know that.
No, I'm happy to.
Sally, if you could go to the microphone and introduce yourself. Go ahead, Rep.
So, Rep, Mr. Chair. Great to be with you. Welcome to all the new FinCom members. I loved being on FinCom. It's such an education. I'm now on the state version of it because I'm on the House Ways and Means Committee, and we just wrapped up, it feels like a month of hearings around the state, tremendous education. But the manager is correct that the governor's budget is always kind of the first draft. And then it gets worked on our side in the legislature, and then the Senate will kind of do their thing. Everyone is very sensitive. I want to address sort of the elephant in the room, which is this special ed, 14%, OSD. There are a few different abbreviations for it. Very dramatic increase in the tuition reimbursement rate for very necessary private special education schools. For some reason, the prior administration put in place this pretty whopping increase all at once. So that's going to be dealt with. The way that we deal with that is through the circuit breaker. And, you know, as Steve said, there'll be a lot of discussion around how we can help our cities, our school districts. I will tell you, at the end of these Ways and Means hearings between your colleagues in rural communities, rural school districts out west, it is absolutely painful to listen to the choices that they have to make. So we'll deal with all of that, and then we're going to also deal with some tax reduction measures that will be in the mix as well. But I know very confidently that our state aid numbers will be agreeable and hopefully maybe better than what you're hoping for, and I'm sure that we'll be dealing with the 14%. I don't know of a legislator who isn't talking to Ways and Means and talking to leadership about it. Everyone is confronting it. And our increases have been steady. A very weird reality during the pandemic is that our numbers were very good in terms of state aid. Delighted that the library is not really being reduced. The pie chart is a little misleading. And we've tried to do our best on state aid and increased it dramatically to libraries. So I'm hoping, welcome to you, Dan, your first budget as our superintendent. So thank you all. I think we're poised to be a reliable, helpful partner, which is what the state ought to be. So questions, slings, arrows, what have you. Easy crowd tonight. Reach out anytime. I'm going to stick around for a few minutes before I head out, but happy to discuss with anyone. And thank you for this merry, great conversations that we've had. Oh, a shout out to the school superintendents and the school, what is it called? Association of School Committees. Fabulous outreach that's been going on for months on the 14%. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Sally. Thanks for being here. All right. Any questions from the audience on the overview? Great. Moving right on to the library budget. Our library director, Noelle Bach, is here. Noelle, thanks for being here. If you could just introduce the staff members and trustees who are here with you tonight.
Absolutely. So
Great.
I'm Noelle Bach, the library director. I have with me Ken Lee here is one of our library trustees. And then I have Jen McGeorge, who's our assistant director, and also Sue Contos, who is our bookkeeper here tonight with me. So thank you for coming along as they usually do. So as Steve has already said, this is not a reduction. Don't get used to it, though. It's not normal. I proposed consolidating 3 part-time positions into 1 full-time position, which is one of the reasons that we have the change in the salaries and wages. And some of our recent hires that we had during the past year did not start at the top, though we had budgeted that them starting at the top step. So that accounts for some of the salary reduction there. And then, as also noted, we moved to a new print management system this year, and the prior one cost quite a bit in support that I didn't even realize until we didn't have to pay that money anymore. So that's why there's a little bit of a drop in the operating expenses. So this is not normal. It won't look like this next year, much to probably Rodney's chagrin, but he likes seeing that. So it's not really a negative. And it is ends up being only a 1% change in our normal budget. Steve, please. So I just had a couple of slides. So this was last year, and I just added to it from last year. So once the library reopened fully, we had a 125% jump in our circulation, which is to be expected once we're back from COVID. And so it's been really nice that we're still seeing a positive trend, and we're up 17% at this point in circulation still. So we are still on the uprise, and we hope to be hitting a higher number again at the end of this fiscal year. So looking good at the library. We're still being very well used. We're getting busier all the time. So that is all great. And go ahead, Steve. And then I was just highlighting, there's lots of things I can highlight about the library, where we say we're the best bargain in town. But this year we really made a big push to do more outreach to more groups. And so this is just a short list of what we've been doing. So there's things I know I left off, but this is good. But we try to participate. We're trying to be everywhere with everybody all the time, or have groups coming in to collaborate with us as well. And one of our greatest things right now is that we've gotten into the New England Homes for the Deaf. So we're meeting with them monthly, going to them monthly, and then they are also have just asked if we could up that to twice a month because they want to outreach even more people. And we just applied for a state grant, an LSTA grant, to be able to train staff to be able to communicate better with the deaf and hard of hearing community in the town, and also buy some technology that we currently do not have as far as making the library more accessible to the deaf and hard of hearing communities. So we're kind of a little bit behind the times for that. But we're working on improving all of that. So that's just a little snapshot of what's going on with the library right now. So I'm happy to take any questions or comments as needed.
Thank you. Arthur?
Yeah, the only thing that I would say is I've been in the audience for about 15 years on school committee, and before we get bludgeoned every year, or before we would get bludgeoned every year, the library would go first, and the library was always great, and you'd always get praise. It's kind of felt bad, but I know why. The library's great. It's awesome, and you probably don't have enough money, but if you say you have enough, that's fine. But whatever, I'd give you more if you wanted more, but it's great. No questions.
We are well supported here.
Okay.
I mean, just to set yourself at ease, we are well supported, and if we needed a lot more money, trust me, I would be asking.
Okay. Thanks.
Mr. Shea, can I ask you one question? Do you think at Mike Daly's first meeting, he offered the first person more money? When he was...
I like the library.
Everyone should like the library.
That's right.
Eric?
I love the library. My question, have you seen any interesting feedback from the no fines or fees and just extending the deadline for when books are due? Obviously, I know that because I get that email saying, they're due Saturday, but then they get extended. And I find that to be very helpful, but I don't know if that has had a negative impact or a positive impact, if people are more comfortable coming out or if there's any dip in fee revenue or
Well,
anything like that.
I mean, of course, the real reason, right, for having no more fines on materials is, partially an accessibility, thing, right? So there's a lot of people who won't come to the library anymore because they are afraid of fines. And as a librarian for most of my life, I can tell you, I meet a new person and they'll say, oh, you work for the library. Oh, I haven't been back to the library in 15 years. I didn't return that one book. And, I can't go back there, as though we're going to recognize you and be like, you still have Catcher in the Rye, we've written you off long ago. So it's a really positive thing, and it's very interesting, even though it's been a while since we've had no fines, that people will still come in and they'll return something and say, oh, it's late, I probably owe money, and they're like, no, you don't. So it's actually a very positive feedback loop that we have on that, for sure. And you still have people that don't know that and will still come in fearful, but they're all very pleasantly surprised that they don't have to worry about fines, and that we have the automatic renewals is also very helpful for people as well. So it's a really good thing.
Wally?
No questions.
Okay. Do you like the library?
I love the library.
Do you want to give them more money?
Erin?
No questions, but I appreciate all the extra children activities that you added. As a family, we benefited from it, so thank you.
Good, you're welcome.
Ted?
No, I don't have any questions. Great job.
Mike?
No, thank you.
Paul?
I have no questions, but thank you for all you do. I've been sitting here for a number of years, and you deserve all the praise you get, really.
Yay, thank you.
My annual question, what is the current balance of the George Peabody Trust, and how much of it is being used this year to help augment all of the wonderful things that you're doing at the library?
So, of course, the market has been up and down quite a bit in the last year. So it was somewhere up near $600,000, and then it went down to under $500,000. And so it's like, I want to say it's around $540,000 right now. So every year, about $20,000 we take from the trust. And so we use that majority to fund all of our programming, gets funded through the trust. They also fund professional development costs, and so that's been another drive of mine this year, is to really push staff to use our professional development funding. So I've got people go to conferences left and right now, which is fantastic, and it's really great that we can support that with the budget. Well, with the half of it's within our town budget monies, and the other half is from the trust monies. The archive also gets some funding from that as well. And one of the other great things that we passed this year with the trust fund monies is, amongst the trustees, is there was an old education policy on the books that if someone on staff wanted to pursue their master's in library science, the old 30-year-old policy would give them $1,000, which doesn't really get you anywhere now in higher education. And so we've changed it so that they are now funding 50% of any costs for classes for someone pursuing the master's. So we're putting it to good use. So there's your question.
Any questions from the audience? Okay, is there a motion?
Move to accept the library funding as in the book.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
All right, thank you very much.
Okay, we're going to move on to Danvers Public Schools, which is the... And welcome Eric Crane and Mary Wormers to present to us this evening.
Good evening. Thank you. My name is Eric Crane. I am the chair of the school committee for this school year, and it is a pleasure to be here before you as we present our budget request for fiscal year 2024. And I have to point out, because why not, that you have 3 members of the class of 1978 with you today, Mr. Skarmas on FinCom, Sally Kearns, and guys, it just occurred to me that we've probably known each other 50 years now. And so we're this far from like being Bill Clark and Dave Mills, and talking about what the town was like. So,
That's me and you.
yes, exactly, there you go. But, we've all stayed here and we've all kept involved, so it says something about the town, I think, the town that we all love. So with me tonight is our acting superintendent, Mary Warrens, our high school principal, Adam Federico, who has been such a help this year to Mary and to the entire district, and our acting business manager, Pamela Crum, who ended up filling some big shoes this year and has done terrifically. And also is Dan Bauer, who many of you have met in one point or another, who is our incoming superintendent. Will start July 1st, but virtually since we offered him the job before he even had a contract, we can't get rid of him. He's here all the time. Breakfasts, and he meets everybody. So seriously, Dan, we're glad to have you here. So the request before you is a 4.79 increase over fiscal year 23. The final number, as always, is a product of the work of our principals, department heads, staffs, along with Mary, Adam, and Pam, in so far as possible to meet the educational needs of the district with a responsible budget that works for the town. It's also a product of a collaborative process with the town manager and his financial team. And a shout out and a thank you to Steve and his team for the partnership in dealing with what has been a very unusual year from a special education standpoint. If you look at this budget, and as Arthur knows from the past, there's not a lot of frills in this budget. There are basically 2 positions that we propose to increase. One is a part-time speech and language therapist. That position is currently grant funded, and now we are going to move that to the annual budget. And the other is an executive assistant position in central office to support the new superintendent, which really replaces a position that we had lost along the way due to personnel changes. So as you will hear from Mrs. Wormers, a significant issue this year involves special education costs. This is driven primarily by the cost of outplacements to specialized school. In the current fiscal year, we've encountered a $1.5 million shortfall. We've worked with the town manager and his team to address this issue. Going forward, this is going to present an ongoing budget challenge. And it's basically because of the overall increase in the number of students who really do require outplacement. And it's not just because of learning issues, but we're seeing an increase in emotional and behavioral issues that require specialized programs to allow them to achieve their educational goals, but also to make sure that the schools continue to be a safe place and a great learning environment for other students. We're trying to meet multiple goals, and sometimes, in order to do that, the best placement for a student is an outplacement. And we have seen an increase. I think Mary can give you the precise numbers. At the same time as that, and Representative Kearns referenced this, that 14% tuition increase. We know that you're working on that and that the legislature is, if it comes through the circuit breaker, that would be great. But from a budget standpoint, what we see from the circuit breaker, we will receive money in fiscal 25 for the expenses in fiscal 24. So we've still got to deal with what's in front of us for this year. But anything that comes back to us, believe me, we appreciate that. I would acknowledge also that our request was approved by our school committee on a 3-2 vote. And during our meeting and budget discussion, we heard from a number of parents who had special education students and were concerned that the budget limitations were limiting the scope and quality of the services that we were providing. Mrs. Wormers, during her presentation, is going to show you a slide which references what we haven't included in the budget. And I believe it's around a total of $600,000 or $700,000, give or take, maybe $750,000. But $525,000 of that relates to special education services that we have attempted to work around this year in other ways, but it's not because it wasn't important to have those services. It was because we're trying to be responsible partners to the town. We have that increase in the outplacements, and we're trying to deal with it realistically. But Mary can again speak to more of that as we get into the budget presentation. So basically, that's it. Looking ahead slightly to coming years, we have contract renegotiations in fiscal '25 with all of our bargaining units, including the teachers. We have an inflationary economy that, as we've seen in other districts, impacts teacher negotiations and also what we provide. We just signed a new bus contract, or are about to. We had one bid on that bus contract. It came in about $50,000 higher than the previous contract. And it's, going to cause us to go back and look at our fee structures and whatever we can do to close that gap. But, much like, not to the scope that Steve is seeing with the trash contracts, providers are starting to raise their prices in terms of what we're being asked to pay, and that is the reality we're all dealing with. So with that, I'd be happy to turn this over to Mary, unless anyone has specific questions for me.
Mary?
Thank you.
All right, so, we'll go to the next slide, thanks. So our budget begins with a foundation, and that foundation is our strategic plan. And we have 3 pillars of that strategic plan, and that plan was developed in 2018, is now at the tail end of its life. So we will be concluding this strategic plan in June of 2023, and we're looking forward to having Dan Bauer on board to develop the next one to move the schools forward. I want to echo Eric's appreciation of town leadership. I think this budget process has been extremely collaborative, that we've got strong support from the town. When we first were encountering some of our special education challenges, we recognized in the fall what was coming and what was going to exist as we started to build the budget, so we early on had meetings with them, as well as starting our normal budget process with our teachers and administrators in November to find out what their needs were at that level. So as we built the budget, we quickly realized that we were just going to be having a level service budget. And what was it going to take to fund the level servicing of our budget? So our goals were to maintain the services. Another one was to develop special education programming, because if we don't do that, the out-of-district costs are going to continue to mount, and that we are going to be very unsustainable for us. And then a third goal is to really develop an innovation pathway program, which we've started and we have the framework for. It came in under the previous Danvers High administration, but we needed to strengthen that program. So we're building that back up for that career pathway in our high school. Remember, the goal of the Common Core that came out is career and college ready. And we were very strong at Danvers High School with being college ready, and now we're starting to shift to also work on being career ready, so that we can work for all the needs of our students and be marketable either way, going to college or going out into a career. As the town manager alluded to, this had been a challenging budget year. It was unusual, I guess is what you said, and we had a number of unknowns when we were trying to build this budget. The first one is our continuing challenges, like trying to get a handle on how those out-of-district placements were happening and how come we were having as many as we were. In the fall, it was announced the OSD approved a 14% increase in out-of-district private tuitions and just the private schools. That is going to come to a cost of about $580,000 for increase, and for our Danvers public schools. So that was a problem to tackle in this budget. We knew we had a bus contract out to bid. We planned for a 9% increase when we built this budget. We just got the budget in this month and realized that came in at a 16.5% increase with only one vendor. I know we had a meeting with that vendor to try to do some negotiation, but it stands at 16.5% increase. So that challenge became more challenging as we're moving forward. And then finally, to find out what the final Chapter 70 funding was, which was a nice, that we did get an increase in Chapter 70 funding that's been proposed in the budget, which sounds like it's going to stand, so that's good news for the Danvers Public Schools. And thinking about what is coming in the fall, that will be our FY24 circuit breaker allotment. So we keep talking about special education, so I wanted to give you a little context for what it looks like in the Danvers Public Schools. So we have about 20% of our students that are on out-of-district placements. That is about 644 students. Out of those students, we now have 70. Someone's gone out of district, and since the time that the slide has been published, 70 students that are IEP students that have out-of-district placements. So that's about 11% of our IEP students out of that 644 that are actually in specialized programs. Over the past 2 years, we've had more students moving in to the district that had out-of-district placements. So they stay put, and then we pick up the cost for their placements, and I will go into more detail on that. We had that approved 14% increase, which I said earlier, it was a $580,000 increase in just the increase for this budget. Also, we were fortunate to get the news that the governor put out the supplemental budget of $75 million. The one concern that is facing, that we've had conversations with representatives, and and all the town and city representatives are going to the Ways and Means Committee, because there's a little nervousness about will there be a threshold to qualify for that relief, or will they be able to apply some kind of formula where all districts across the state will get that funding? So that's kind of the work that's happening now with you all. And then my final point is that all districts across Massachusetts are facing this. The superintendents, the North Shore superintendents, had a legislative lunch a couple weeks ago, and we met with our legislators and told them the challenges that we're facing, and kind of gave them some potential solutions that we were thinking of, knowing the details of our school budgets. So digging into the out-of-district placements, I said that we have we had students moving in. So in 2021, we had 7 students moving in with out-of-district placements. And actually, when Keith DeVerna was here last time, at this time of year, it was at 5. So as you know, as we build the budget, but then still students can move into Danvers with that. And that's why we had, coming into our school year, we were behind on our projection of our out-of-district placement costs. This year, to the publishing of this slide, we had three, but we since have had 2 students move into Danvers in the last month and a half that are placed out of district. So we've held steady with how many we send out in a given year. We've seen an increase in that. I think COVID and some of the behavioral issues have really had that number stay high. We're working on developing stronger programming so that we can keep students in our district, because our goal is that if a child lives in Danvers, that they stay with their peers and they get to stay in Danvers and get their education. So as we've begun this budget planning, we've really working to shore up our specialized programs in Danvers. Lynn O'Neill, who's our special education director, has been here for a year and a half. So she spent a year kind of assessing what's been happening in it, and she's now ready to make those program changes. Another amazing addition for us over the last school year that we've used predominantly ESSER funding for was to hire 3 special education coordinators, each at a level. So an elementary special education coordinator, a middle school coordinator, and a high school coordinator. They will be helping Lynn with the building of that program, as well as refining processes that we have in the special education process when a child's identified as potentially needing special education services. So at this time, I'm going to call up Pam Crum, because she's going to go into the real financial detail of how we fund special education in our budget.
Well, I thought this slide was important because it illustrates not only the increases that we have had year over year between what we've expected and planned for, and then what actually happens, or as we get into your happens. It also kind of illustrates some of the creative collaboration that we've done to help cover the costs during this trend of increasing placements and tuitions and transportation associated with that. So in FY22, we had planned on $6.6 million in special ed costs, and we had about $600,000 more than that happen that school year because of what Mary spoke of with both move-ins and outplacements. So we worked with the town and we created an FY23 budget. I worked with Keith when he was creating that for us. And we planned on a $7.3 million budget that we could work with, or funding mechanism that we could work with. And yet this year the costs have continued to climb and we're over $9 million projected for this year. So with the 14% increase of the tuitions and the associated transportation costs and challenges related to hiring and inflationary costs, the FY24 budget is prepared to handle, hopefully, no more than the $9.2 million that we have forecast in expenditures. I will repeat what everyone else has pretty much already said. We appreciate very much the collaboration with the town leadership to handle these challenges in the short term. The appropriations of free cash and the leveraging of the Circuit Breaker Reserve Fund to cover the costs over a year or two, those are good short-term solutions. They're not sustainable if the trend continues in an upward direction, which is why our town and school leaders have been in close communication with our state representatives to make sure everyone's aware of what we're facing. I also wanted to just, I guess, remind everybody that last year we did create a special education stabilization fund through town meeting, and $150,000 was appropriated to go into that fund. This year, the town is going to recommend a $600,000 appropriation to that special education stabilization fund. The purpose of it is to allow the schools, and therefore the town, to ride out these sorts of spikes in costs when they happen cyclically, which historically happens every 4 or 5 years. When they happen year over year over year, we have more of a challenge. But if they happen cyclically, then the idea is a relatively small appropriation every year will create the stabilization fund, and then a spike can be addressed by accessing those dollars with the approval of both the school committee and the select board.
Thank you, Pam. So that was an overview of special education, the challenges we face, and how we're funding them. So now we want to dig into the budget, because that's why we're here. So we're finally getting to it. So what is in our FY24 budget? We have a $2,235,341 increase, and of that increase, we're seeing about $1 million in salaries. Most of that is contractual obligations with our unions, but we also had two positions. One was that half-time speech and language teacher that was funded by a grant that we need to now move into our school budget, and then one is the executive assistant to the new superintendent and the school committee, and that that is being funded through a position that has been vacant for about a year, and it was held by Diane Tebow, who has moved on, and she was a half-time executive assistant to the school committee, and then our payroll specialist. So we have that funding through those positions. So we have non-salary increases, and again, this is the inflation part. I would think we have digital subscriptions that we have seen an increase in the amounts they're charging. We also had a couple Carnegie math program that we have in grade 6 through now 11 that we were funded on a grant from the Department of Education. Again, those materials need to be purchased yearly and now move from a grant onto our budget. We have a Chromebook lease from Holton Richmond we started last school year, and that we were short on the amount of money that we expected that we needed to fund, so we had to add that into this budget so that we can continue to make sure the funds are there to keep renewing, paying down that lease. In transportation, we talked about negotiating that new bus contract, and then we see that larger amount of money comes from the special education transportation. Because one thing we forgot to really mention was, as the students are getting placed out of district, we also have to pay for their transportation that goes along with it. the inflation on that has been astronomical, and it was a very eye-opening to me as we came in. And then to Adam Federico, who's been doing a lot of the transportation work, eye-opening for us this school year. And we're working now, as we've come in, we're starting to think of solutions to kind of bringing down those costs. And then finally, the special education costs. Again, that increase looks not a lot because we have these other funding mechanisms that Pam described. So this slide I put in, this slide is what's not in our budget. It was because we came forward, the priority was coming forward responsibly with a level service budget. And so these were items that were in the budget that were identified as really important by our stakeholders, not only the school district personnel, but also families. And then Eric referenced the parents that came to our school committee meeting, asking us to make sure we shore up our special education staffing. So, what's not in that budget are salaries for, building any kind of new programming to keep out-of-district, tuitions from going up because we have out-of-district placements. So we need a social worker at the elementary level and a social worker at the middle school level to help with programming there. We also need special education teachers with specialized reading certificates. I think a lot of us understand, you've seen in the news, the science of reading, the new challenges around that students are facing in reading. And we have classes called language-based LBLD classrooms. So we're starting a new one at the Holton Richmond Middle School, and we're doing that through kind of budget reallocation to make that happen. But that was something that was also needed funding for. Special education, autism, we're working to strengthen that through line from elementary, where we really have strong programming, to middle and high school, where that program gets a little bit weaker as they move up the grade levels. So we need that as a definite area of need. Other needs were a therapeutic support team at the district level, because when there's students in crisis at a school, they have a behavior team at their school, but they needed added resources to help them support those kids. So that's what we found this year, that we were deploying people from other schools to go to another school to help out. So it would be great to have those resources. We need intervention support, website update. That was something that came to us from FinCom last year. It was something that we definitely understood it was important to do. As we came in, though, and recognizing the budget constraints we had in the school year, we were able to fund a website survey, like a exploratory kind of process where we did a survey with parents to find out what was working and not working for them in the website, and then kind of getting recommendation from our website developer on some improvements. They've put forward proposals for our next school year on the improvements that are needed. But in the meantime, I've worked with our technology director, Jim Sullivan, and we have, fortunately, we've hired a very talented computer paraprofessional at the high school level who has website design in his background. So he's helping us make some very small changes until we get to that big improvement. So we've improved some of our drop-down menus. We realize that parents are looking for school calendars, lunches, and the athletic schedules, and we're trying to get those up front so people can access them right away. What else we're missing is a public relations consultant. I think we all have had conversations about that, improving the reputation of the Danvers Public Schools. I think sometimes the narrative is sticking when the schools are not as dire as some people make them out to be. And then always we can use teacher aides in our schools. We cannot fund we cannot hire for all the positions we actually have right now, but that is definitely needed as some of our students have greater needs. On the non-salary account, we're looking for materials for our innovative programming, talking about the Danvers High Pathway programs. Recently, Jim Sullivan, Adam Federico, Peter DeMauro, the high school curriculum director, and myself applied for a capital skills grant to bring in more technical equipment so kids can work towards career certification, and we put in funding for that. We're looking forward to hearing to see if we got that grant. We need reading and math screeners at Holton Richmond Middle School. We have a small pilot running right now off some grant funding that we currently have in the school district. There's a greater need for specialized assessments for special education. And then One area that we need to work on increasing, and we're hoping to do so in the next school year, is elementary school supplies. That amount that we give the elementary schools per pupil has remained stagnant for years, for about 8 years now. We have not had an increase, and then you're looking at an inflation increase over the last years, but we've had to keep it, to have this level service budget, we've kept it stagnant. And then also always our art, music and PE teachers are looking for more equipment, but we keep level funding their budgets year after year. And then HRMS needed a computer lab or tech ed upgrade. We took that out of our budget because our percent increase was creeping higher and not fiscally responsible. So we've been working with the town. Our director, Jim Sullivan, and Colby are working together to put that on a warrant article. So what we try to do is meet some of these needs by reallocating some of our assets that are in the school budget currently. So we're looking to, for example, at the elementary level, we're adding 1 classroom in 5th grade at Smith School to complete that 3-classroom continuum that as we opened Smith School was our goal. So we're completing that, but we are, because of the smaller class sizes at Great Oak, we have only 2 classrooms at Great Oak in kindergarten. They're moving up to just 2 classrooms in grade 1, so there's a 3rd grade 1 teacher, so that position will get shifted over to Smith. So that is a net neutral cost. We're also shifting some positions in special education to open. We have a learning center at Thorpe School that's now going to be growing to a K-5 program because a lot of younger students are coming in. So we had a need for 2 teachers in that learning center, and so we reallocated a special education position to fill that. Finally, at Danvers High School, we're using FTE of a teacher, so we have multiple teachers that we're taking sections of their schedule and putting them to more of our innovative programming. We're using 6.8 FTE for the Innovation Pathway Program, and Adam will be up in a moment to tell you about that. And we're using 1.0 FTE for our early college program with the North Shore Community College. We send students to earn college credits, and they actually attend class on campus and at the Danvers campus of North Shore Community College, and they are working to earn high school credit for those classes. Right now, our first cohort is in English, and they're also earning college North Shore credit, which can be transferred to 4-year universities in the UMass system. It's a great program, and we really targeted at non-traditional college students to attend this program so that they are able to get on campus, see what college life is like, get the support of our Danvers teachers so that when they're doing their coursework, they understand what is needed to study and be successful in college, and get it during high school before they get to college, and really making that pipeline so that they can be available to the college level work. So right now I'm going to turn the mic over to Adam and tell you what's going on at Danvers High.
Good evening. Thank you for having me here tonight. It's great to see a lot of you. I feel like I've worked with many of you in different ways, so it's great to be here. I'm really here to focus tonight to tell you about what we're doing with our current high school staffing. So just some general trends first. We anticipate that our enrollment will head back over 800 for next year. We have a smaller senior class leaving and a greater 8th grade class coming in. So we do anticipate that enrollment will be trending upward. We currently offer 18 AP or advanced placement courses. These really allow us to challenge our students at the highest levels. Students that choose to take the AP exam can then take a grade of 3, 4, or 5 on that exam and get college credit. We currently offer 2 innovation pathways, and I can explain what those are, but one focuses on career and preparation in the biomedical science field, and the other focuses on career and preparation for jobs in the manufacturing fields. And then lastly, Mary just mentioned our early college program. This again allows any DHS student to take classes both at Danvers High School and at North Shore Community College. This program really increases their chances of completing a 2- or a 4-year degree, and this is at no cost to our Danvers family. So this is a great option where kids can leave Danvers High School with their high school diploma, but also a bunch of credits already done that they can transfer into the UMass system and actually other colleges as well. So it's a great value for our families, and we're finding great success. The cohorts are really enthusiastic about their experience. So we talked a lot about innovation pathways. Well, what does this mean? Well, Innovation Pathways is a designation that we've attained from the Department of Ed, and it's really a commitment to providing specific courses in, that promote students learning more in fields that need more people. So at Danvers High School, we offer 2 right now. One is in advanced manufacturing, and so what you see on the screen here is these are all courses taught by Danvers High School teachers. It's a combination of advanced coursework and technical coursework. And again, you can just see the variety of courses. When you see something like manufacturing, that's both traditional. So we have a wonderful wood shop at Danvers High School with excellent tools, both hand tools, automatic tools. So we have kids doing traditional manufacturing of furniture, of those skills, carpentry skills. Then we also have the technical side. So that's your 3D printing, your design, CAD. So again, you have both worlds in our 2 manufacturing labs. And then on the advanced side, again, you see many of those AP courses for the advanced manufacturing. It's offered in science and in mathematics. So we're able to offer a really robust AP program. Another example of a pathway that we currently have in place is our healthcare and social services pathway. So again, you can see on the left side some of the courses that our staff teach, everything from biomedical science, human body systems, medical interventions, first responders. So again, you can see there's a variety of courses where kids can start to develop a base of technical coursework. And then again, a lot of the sciences that are needed for entrance into the healthcare and social services field. And what's nice about this pathway and where we're going with it is what we're seeking to do is 2 things. One, we're adding opportunities for kids to sit for certificates, professional certificates, so things like perhaps an EMT license, maybe medical coding, things like that. Also, if you're a student that's looking to go into nursing, the reality is you're going to need to get into a competitive college. And so Massachusetts in particular, we're surrounded by some of the best nursing programs. By having this pathway, it really sets up our students to be competitive to go into the nursing world. And again, having this advanced coursework, having those AP courses allows our students to present a really competitive application to really what are some of the best nursing programs around us. So those are just 2 innovation pathways. Long term, our hope is to continue to build on that program. We want to do these 2 right and really have these going well, and then look to expand in other ways. So that is kind of what's going on at Danvers High School right now in terms of what we're doing with our current staff. I would just add one more note about our current staff. We use our current staff and additionally to support specialized programs for kids that are struggling. So, we have 2 specialized programs. We have the DRIVE program and the TLC program. Those are 2 programs that support kids that maybe are struggling with some behavioral needs. So what we do is we have a lot of our general ed staff will partner with a special education teacher to work with those kids to maintain their academics. And then the other one, TLC, really focuses on kids that are maybe struggling with mental health. So it could be transitioning back from a hospitalization placement, maybe an outside placement, or maybe they're struggling with mental health issues and they need just sort of a different environment to maintain their academic progress. And again, our general ed staff are key parts of that. So we're really using our staff, I think, responsibly and efficiently, and you can be assured that there's a quality program happening at Danvers High School right now. So I'm going to turn it back over, I think, to Mary to present some other statistics around the budget proposal.
And I just did want to also add about your pathway program. In the capital skills grant, when we did that application, we applied for a environmental science pathway, and we were very fortunate to work with the town and be able to partner with Stephen King, the town engineer, who supported that. Because what happens is you have to show that you're partnering with industry outside of your high school for internships for kids to go to work. So he's made a commitment to, and he's had interns from Danvers High coming to work in his department, and we're really excited about that potential partnership. So I just wanted to add that little side note to it as well, and thank him for that. So here's a summary of our budget. I bet you thought you'd never get here with us. We are asking for a $4.86 million budget, and it represents a $2.24 million increase, which will be a 4.79% increase over FY23. I also included 2 charts here. The one on the left really signals that there have been 3 other years that we've been over 4% asking for it in other in years that have challenged, and FY '23 was one of those years that was challenged. And again, I think that challenge came from our special education increased costs. And then the last little statistic I want to share with you is our total expenditures per pupil. And Danvers had always been slightly above the state average as we move forward. And then this school year, when I put this chart together for our Citizens Academy, I noticed that we had now dropped below the state on our per pupil. So, and I think that comes from our increase out of district costs and special education costs, because it factors in, you know, how much money, your total budget, but then, you know, how much is in-district spending added to the out-of-district spending. So we, I think the increased costs in our district has brought down our per pupil versus the state. So there you go. So that's our presentation, and we're ready for your questions.
Thank you, Mary. Appreciate it. Great presentation. Paul?
Yes, thank you. First of all, I'd like to thank Mary Wilmers and Adam Federico, the school committee, the whole entire staff, at regardless of what level, from K through 12, for the work they've done during this interim period prior to hiring Mr. Bauer, and we'd like to welcome Mr. Bauer to the town. And everybody that I've talked to regarding this choice has been nothing but positive. And believe me, Mr. Bauer, I have ways of going outside those recommendations, and those people highly recommended you, so welcome. You have a lot of work to do, and I'm very confident that we're going to be successful. I have quite a few questions, but I'm going to just go through a few, and then let my colleagues get a chance. The first question has never been talked to here, but I'd like to bring it up as a sidebar because I'm interested in it. I believe I have the right term. They're called AEDs. And I want to know how we stack up. First of all, are we one of the states, I believe there are 16 states, that require the use of the ADA at events? Is that am I correct there in the state?
I don't know about like state law requiring the use of them, but we definitely have them, and
Yes.
we're trained on them.
All right, because I believe this is all the incident that took place during the past football season with the player up at Buffalo, how they were able to revive him. You have to have that equipment on hand. And it's not just for a football or an athletic event. I hope we have enough. I hope that we have them dispersed throughout the schools and even the town, because you just never know when someone's going to need that equipment. And I don't believe the cost is prohibitive in any way. Now, the equipment that they used at that particular game is much more expensive than what we would be able to afford for every building. But I will say this, if we had an incident right here in this room tonight, we would need the same type of equipment. I don't know if we have it here. I don't know if it's on hand, but we need it. And it's just not here. It may be a band practice. It could be anything from an event down at the Smith School or the Thorpe School where family and parents and grandparents come in, and all of a sudden you need this type of equipment. So to me, it's not a budget issue. It's a necessity that we have to have these. I don't know how many we have, but I'm just throwing it out there, period. I'll leave it at that.
I'll just add that we do offer a course at Danvers High School called First Responders. It was in that medical science pathway. So every quarter or every semester, that class fills, and all those kids get both CPR and AED certification. So,
Excellent. Thank you.
We're trying to create a base of citizens that have that training as well.
Do you feel this is a hard question to ask. I don't mean to put you on the spot, anybody, but is it our feeling that we have enough of this equipment in townwide? Could be, I could ask Mr. Bartha the same question, because we have events all over this town. We're going to have a town meeting in a couple of weeks after election.
I'm thinking that, I wondered if the deputy fire chief planted this question, Paul. He was on the phone with me today. He and the public health nurse have been going building to building, taking stock of what's current, and they have a recommendation that we procure a couple of units before the end of this fiscal year
Regarding this topic?
regarding this topic.
Oh, well,
So, yes.
timing is wonderful,
Yep.
yeah. Okay, thank you. Now, athletic contract services, I noticed in one section of the budget. Does that include, what contract services, who, is that's a personnel contract that we have, that we're bringing folks into the system, and what does that consist of?
Yes, no, for
It's not a special ed
Oh,
question.
I'm sorry. The contracted services is for the athletic training services through the athletic department. So to have staff available for the students at games.
Yes. Those folks that are brought in at a particular game, regardless of the contest, doesn't matter, could be anything. Once the game is over, what is their responsibility? In other words, someone gets hurt and may or may not return to a contest. Monday comes around or Sunday comes around, is that trainer available to help with treatment?
Yeah, so our contract, we have one person that's basically our assigned person. So the kids would call her Miss Amanda, and she's available for treatment. She follows up with athletes, with their parents, and then she's also available. We have the treatment room
Right.
at the high school. So she's our, sort of our person with our athletes. And if she's absent, the contract provides for a substitute.
Okay, is that person, so it's a contract person that's assigned, let's say, throughout the fall, as an example?
It's annual, so it's
For the whole,
year.
for the whole school year?
Yep.
Right. Oh, that's excellent, good. I'm just getting information that I need, all right? I need some of this information to put me at ease. I don't know if I need a tutorial or I should put this question somewhere else in this review, because I see that what we're getting is, we talk about a circuit breaker. Okay, that's a circuit breaker fund. Is that, the money for that fund, is that put in by the town? Where does that, because I hear circuit breaker, now I hear free cash, which I think we're using free cash this year. And then we're going to set up a fund. We've already put $150,000 in, we're going to put another $600,000 in. Because the question I have is, you know, we're trying to handle something like OPED, and we're getting out to 2035 and putting this amount of money out. Is there a possibility, is this where we're heading, to try to get ahead of these costs that are going to come? And we have, as a town, we have to honor these costs, and we demand that we honor these costs. But we can't keep sort of catching up. We take one step forward and we take 2 steps back, and we get caught. At what point do we take so-called the pressure off the town that we have every year to face this problem, and eliminate the problem if we can develop the fund so that it's large enough to handle any high or low over a 3, 4, 5-year period, so that we're not knocked back every time, once in a while, when we think we made it, and then all of a sudden we haven't. And this is not really probably for the school department. It's basically because of the situation and the fact that we have to honor our commitment. How do we approach this long range, I guess, is what I'm looking at.
The circuit breaker is a reimbursement, it's a state reimbursement program that's set up quite similarly to the way that Veterans Benefits works, the Chapter 115 benefits.
Right.
Where the year after the cost is incurred, the state will reimburse 75% of qualifying expenses above a certain base, which I believe is $45,000.
49.
I made the same mistake last time, $49,000. So if a child has an out-of-district placement cost in excess of $49,000, the state will reimburse us next year for 75 cents on the dollar for those expenses. And Ms. Crum said, what we've seen historically is that those costs will ebb and flow. And so a reimbursement system works flawlessly when your costs are rising and falling, because you can draw the circuit breaker down when your costs are going up, and then the next year's reimbursement replenishes that account when the costs are dropping again. coming out of COVID, Danvers and a lot of communities have seen that cost go up year after year after year. So your 75% from last year's expense is a much smaller portion of your new expense. So what we did last year, we went to town meeting, and this is statutorily, towns and cities can create special education revolving stabilization funds, similar to our general stabilization fund and our debt stabilization fund. And we wanted to set aside funds outside of the circuit breaker program so that if we find ourselves in a year where that cycle extends 1 or 2 years, we have somewhere to look other than the circuit breaker account to try to shave the peak of that. So where the free cash came in this year is, historically, the schools have tried to reserve about 1 year's worth of circuit breaker to have on hand. We go back a couple slides. Ms. Crum presented the kind of the year-over-year special education costs, and I will note that at the far right,
Yep.
third row down, special education charge to circuit breaker reserve. So in the '24 budget, we're charging $3.25 million off the circuit breaker. That's almost double what we historically charge off. We're using $1.5 million out of free cash to balance the '23 budget, or we'd have to draw that money down to balance this budget and not have it available for next year's budget. So it's a lot of moving pieces, but the circuit breaker, the funding for that comes from the state. And then it is used by the school district to cover qualifying expenses.
And then the fund that whether we have set up now, which is 100.
Separate from that. and
Separate
it is-
from that, but that will also,
It's available, and
Right.
town meeting appropriates into it.
right,
And it can only be accessed by votes of the school committee, followed by the select board.
okay.
And I think where the state rep made the point, part of what we're contending with in '24 is that unique 14% tuition increase that was approved at the very end of calendar year '22, which is going to hit next year. So that's a $580,000 increase on top of our increasing special education costs. So the truth is, if we, the Mass Municipal Association has its arms wrapped around this problem, the Superintendent's Association has its arms wrapped around this problem, the school committee, the legislature is acutely aware of this issue, the governor's office is acutely aware of this issue, because if the circuit breaker system will collapse on itself if we continue to see year over year over year over year increases in these out-of-district. If more and more kids in the Commonwealth are attending these facilities, and the funding comes 18 months later, 75 cents on the expense, then the whole thing will collapse on itself.
Yeah.
So if this continues next year, that we're going to be in a difficult situation, absent
Right.
some sort of state intervention.
If I hear you correctly, we are taking steps to handle this in the future in a proper way through the funding of the new special ed fund.
I think that's the reaction, that
That's what I'm looking
we have
for.
to do that, but part of what Mary mentioned on her slide about what's not in the budget and what the school committee was asking about at their meeting was, what programming are we trying to stand up now to keep kids? Some kids have needs that we will never be able to meet in district. But some kids do have needs. Some kids are leaving the district now that may have needs that we could manage in district if we had the right programming in place. And that's where the grade level coaches come in. Our relatively new special education director is looking at that to try to figure out what are those programs. Because ideally, we want to keep all the kids we can keep. At the end of the day, the parents have the final say about whether the kids stay or go. But we want to have programming in place that will meet the needs and then be able to convince the parents to try those programs. And eventually that will change the trend line, because when we talk about the reserve and the circuit breaker, that's just paying for the bill, and we'd like to avoid the bill if we can.
Right. But no child will be denied services. No, absolutely.
And I
Okay.
just want to add one thing, too. The Superintendent's Association is also asked the legislature to look at how the funding for special education happens. So Chapter 766, the original special education funding mechanism, is 50 years old. And so they're looking for, like, the state to really relook at these expenses and think about, like, what would be a more updated way to fund special education, because it's very different from 50 years ago.
Yeah, I just adamantly would want to see us be able to handle this so that we don't, every year, we're not getting, again, taking the one step forward and 2 steps backward, and we just don't seem to have a handle on it. I have one other question, but I'm going to reserve. I'll relinquish my time brief.
Mike?
I relinquish my time.
Thanks. And I apologize if, I don't know if you folks know, I guess there's a fire that's down at the,
Yeah, at the high
the
school.
the high
Yeah,
school.
I'm
So
sure.
my wife is giving me updates because we live by
In the
there,
woods,
so.
not
In the woods.
at the
Yeah,
high
the,
school.
well, the woods that abut my house,
Here,
so, yeah.
The school budget you just reviewed, throw it out.
That's exactly right.
Even kindergarten orientation, we could see the smoke in the back, and so, yeah, it was good. The firefighters were there, so.
In regards to the stuff that we have, that we funded through ESSA, the $890,000, where's the cliff on that? Is it next year, is it the year after that?
I'm sorry.
The cliff, when we don't get those
That's our-
funds,
Oh, yeah, next year is the cliff. Yes.
what do we have planned? Because those are, I know those are programs that we feel are important,
Right.
very important, and to be able to address. Do
Right.
we think there may be a separate state funding option for that, or are we just going to have to try to pick that up?
I think we're planning on trying to pick that up. Some of the positions were temporary because of the recovery from COVID, so we did that. Some of the $800,000 are positions that we took off the budget this year and they were newly created last year, and we were going to use it with the SOA funding, additional funding on the budget, but when our special education expenses got so extensive, we shifted their salaries off into the ESSER budget. So we're hoping that, with the relief of the supplemental budget, and that might help give us some more money, that we can shift back those positions into the budget this fiscal year. So that would be something that would be in the budget, which would minimize what we have left to put on during the FY25 year.
Great. In terms of and this is not by far a big deal at all, obviously, from a financial number, but my daughter, who's a varsity soccer coach at another community, would want me to wonder, why do we pay the football coach $10,000 and we pay the soccer coaches $5,000, and we pay, if I look at the budget, the entire lacrosse program for both girls and boys, which is probably at least 4 teams, and I'm going to guess has twice as many kids in it as the football program does, has a budget about a third of the football budget at this point. Do we have, how are we analyzing that athletic budget in terms of how we're paying? And trust me, I'm not talking about lowering what we pay the football coach. I'm talking about increasing what we pay our other coaches.
So I'd start by saying that, coaching salaries are part of a negotiation, so they're part of the teacher's contract, so that gets set through the negotiation process. Numbers-wise, lacrosse is probably a little lower than what you're actually perceiving. I would say football brings in the biggest gate receipts as part of.
Yeah, but it doesn't pay. It doesn't pay.
No,
for
it doesn't.
Like
But
it
I
used
think
to.
if you put all the sports together,
Yeah.
football has the most significant gate.
Yeah.
So I would say, we're excited to bring in a new athletic director, another hat that I'm happy to give away. But I think it's a fair point. We continue to look at equity and access and making sure that all our athletes have what they need. And we have a teacher's contract that's going to be negotiated next year, and coaching salaries would be a part of that. I would say that structure that you're referencing is pretty consistent across the Commonwealth. Not that that makes it okay, but it generally lays out that way if you look at any school system. But we certainly want to make sure that our programs have what they need, and regardless of what they are.
And on sort of the same front, why is the user fee for lacrosse the same as football and hockey?
I don't believe it is.
I thought that's what we.
No, I believe football, hockey are some of the highest.
Yeah, I mean, it might be a misprint. It says that football is $245, girls and boys lacrosse is $245.
That might,
He is correct, that it's
Okay.
$245 is the max season fee for any of the sports.
okay, so, fee structure is something that we've
And
talked about.
I can understand. I mean, I understand why ice hockey, swimming, and golf, would be
Yeah, they
the
get into
higher end.
facilities.
We've got, and I'm not sure wrestling also is at $245.
Right, so I think, again, fees are something we've had conversations about, and once we have our athletic director in place, we could certainly take a look at fee structure. Again, that's not going to solve, raising fees in certain areas or altogether isn't going to solve some of the financial needs of the athletic department, but I think it's a worthy cause to take a look at.
No, but this is this is hand-to-hand combat at this point. We got to keep every one of those kids in the 8th grade coming to Danvers High School. And that might, if the difference with some of those kids is the fact that they can go someplace else where they don't have to pay any user fees. And we're charging kids again, if I'm a young lady who's playing lacrosse and I'm saying to myself, why am I paying $245 for my kid to play lacrosse, which, is going on at the high school. It's no greater, maybe there's slight more transportation because the leagues push the kids a little farther out. I don't know. But the point is that, these little things are making a difference in terms of where the kids are going. And I appreciate your numbers about the fact that we're hoping that next year's class.
I feel very confident about that.
I know the numbers from the Aggie.
You know the application numbers.
I think I might know.
No one knows who's going to actually go there.
That's true, but I would be.
And the incoming class is much larger than what's going on.
Let's just say that I would not be shocked if we have less than 70 kids going there next year.
That would be great.
Which leaves us down to 200 kids before any kids go to any other school.
I think we'll be over 800, and I think this class will be a strong class.
I hope so.
That's what I believe.
Yeah.
Ted?
I guess, Mary, you said something earlier. I wanted you to clarify. The expenditure per pupil numbers do not include out-of-district?
No, they do. They
They
do.
do.
That's why I think, because we've had those increased expenses this year and out-of-district costs. So you take, it's a formula where you're dividing the district's operating costs by your average pupil membership. So because we've had increase of kids going out of district, that is also, I think that's how that is made our number go a little bit lower than what has been traditionally in it. Because when you look at it, we've only have about $700 per pupil from last year over this
Right.
year, so.
Okay. Okay. So there's a couple questions I had. One of the things I've tried to look at this year is how things have changed over more than one budget cycle. Like, I went back and searched my Gmail for Rodney's name and found a couple of older budgets in there to like just look at trends. One thing at the high school I wanted to ask, it looks like we've increased the guidance counselors from like 6.5, call it, FTEs, in 2020 to 8 now.
I think it's,
We've had
I mean, that's what the budget's,
we've
that
had
is what the
4
budget
guidance
said.
counselors. I mean, this is my second year. We had 4 last year,
yeah.
as
Three
far,
at the middle school.
and then 3 at the middle school.
So I think Pam, do we?
Are there
charge a
other
social
headcounts in
worker
there?
for that line? I think we might have put a social worker on that line.
If that includes social workers, that number did increase from last year to this year.
Yeah, just in the budget, it has guidance at 8 FTEs.
We have 4 guidance counselors
So it's,
and 3 social workers.
so it
Well,
might-
4 social workers.
So it's probably like a classification thing,
So
rather
if
than
it's
like a
8,
change in
8, I
program.
would guess that refers to 4 guidance counselors and 4 social workers. I mean, I've been in Danvers for 11 years. There's been 4
Okay.
since, as long as I've been here.
I believe you.
Yeah,
we have increased social.
social workers have gone up.
Okay, thanks for that. And then, so, one of the things, I've got a whole bunch of kids in the school district, and I just want to say, I don't think we're maintaining level services. I did look back at the teaching personnel in the elementary school level in 2020. I think we've reduced the number of primary school teachers by 4 across the district. We're at 77 right now, and it was 81 4 years ago. I think the net, as best as I could tell from looking at the budgets, the net change in students in those classrooms is about 30 or 40 lower now than it is then. And I know there's been a lot of there's a lot of moving parts right now, and I want to say to you two in particular, I know you're wearing a lot of hats and you're probably dog tired, and I respect that. But I look back and, I'm looking at the Highlands, I'm a Highlands parent. I'm looking at, and I know I think I came to the school committee meeting after the budget hearing last year. just to talk about this a little bit, but the average primary classroom size at Highlands right now is 21.4. The average primary classroom size across the street, almost literally across the street at Great Oak, is 17. And there's literally 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 primary classrooms with 23 or more kids at Highlands. Great Oak, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, in total, over 20. I don't understand how our district doesn't allow people to volunteer to move their kid. I have no other word for it but other than asinine. I don't understand. It's a mile away. People should be able to volunteer to take their kid out of a 24-person classroom and go across the street to a 16-person classroom. It really frustrates me that we don't allow that. It seems completely logical.
Yeah, but I think that our Danvers model was always like a neighborhood school, so we had that mindset.
It's kind of, I know, and that's kind of why I prefaced it. I know you're not the architect of you weren't making these resource allocation decisions for the last 10 years. But I mean, Great Oak and Highlands, frankly, they're basically the same neighborhood. But even if they're not, if someone's willing to move their child and drive them on their own, everybody wins. I don't see how anybody loses in that situation.
And I definitely faced that coming into this year's kindergarten enrollment, because we had an increased enrollment at the Thorpe School, and we tried with the flex zones, and so I gained a very new appreciation for how kids get placed in schools this year, and we've ended up having to open up, Thorpe had gone down like Great Oak, and Riverside down to 2 classrooms, but Thorpe now has to increase 3 kindergarten classrooms because there's no way to flex zone our way out to reduce it down to just 2 classrooms. So that is it. And then the enrollment's a little bit down in Highlands, which was a really interesting concept for us, because Highlands, as you see, have so many students. But that is the flex zone. The ideas of flex zones are good ones, and but what the policy has been is that when you enter kindergarten in a school, you stay there because it's your neighborhood school, and becomes your home school. You stay there through grade 5. But we have over the years seen increases in requests from parents to shift to schools, especially like Smith School, as the new Smith School opens. So that is something we need to look at. It would be something that we would take up with the policy subcommittee of the school committee.
So, can we actually do that? I came to the school committee after the finance committee meeting last year and brought it up, and then it just kind of died.
But we can, yes, we can definitely, we actually have to, we're actually going to have a policy committee to look at a few other things.
It's, we talk a lot about equity in town, and I don't see a lot of equity in the way educational resources are allocated at the elementary school level in terms of head count.
Yeah, I will say that the benchmark is 50 students. So if you have 49 students, you have 2 classes. You have 51 students, you have 3 classes. So that is the benchmark number. That hadn't been applied earlier on. It is a more recent thing that we've been doing to try to keep that equity. And so that is kind of our formula right now for how we decide whether there's 2 or 3 classrooms at a school.
And so now stepping away from that at a broad level, what is our strategy to make use of the facility at Smith and all the other schools? It looks like we have 2 or 3 elementary schools that are going to be roughly 2/3 full. If I'm just assuming that Great Oak's going to end up with 2 classrooms, I think Thorpe is kind of trending that way.
Actually, Thorpe is is going up the other way now.
No, okay.
Because they added a learning center and now a kindergarten. Now they're pretty full.
I guess, why are we cutting the number of primary school teachers in the elementary school? And is that a conscious decision, or is that just something that's passively happened?
It happened as we were decreasing to 2 at both Great Oak and Thorpe. As we decreased down to 2 kindergarten classes, that's when we would take that position and reallocate it to a grade that might have needed another position. For example, Smith, as we started to build up Smith, we've had at least 2 years that I know of that have been net neutral because we've reallocated that teacher over to Smith.
But on average, we're letting our classrooms get bigger at the elementary school level. And I know I listened to Dan and a lot of other principals, or aspiring superintendents, I should say, in the interviews, and every single one of them talked about the need for small classrooms at the elementary school level, and the need for people to be able to access curriculum down the road by having strong reading and writing skills. And it seems to me like we're not making a conscious decision to do that in this district right now. And again, I know that is not, like, that's not your doing. And I'm sorry, I have to take it out
No,
on
and
you.
It was a
Like,
definite conversation as we are opening up another kindergarten class at Thorpe. That is a definite conversation we're having at our level, is like, do we try to go down to 2 and have large classroom sizes, or do we try to keep 3, just add 1 to the
Right.
existing number of teachers that we have right now?
Okay. So I'll move on to the special ed. Can you talk, I know you guys talked a little bit about inflation, but it looks like the transportation almost tripled from year over year. Can you walk me through how, like that, I know that's not just inflation, right? Like that, like what?
No,
what-
that's, again, it's that lack of competition for our transportation providers. So as we had increased number of students going out of district, we had to transport them. So those contracts are out, go out to bid, and we have one company coming back, or very few companies coming back with the bid. So whatever number they provide us, and we have one person coming back with that, we need to take it, because we have to honor that obligation to transport that child. So we have students that are being transported $350 a day, 180 days a school year. So, yeah, so that's kind of how that's gone. We've been working hard. We've reached out to other, SEAM Collaborative, which is another collaborative just like our Northeast, North Shore Educational Collaborative. They have a transportation consolidation kind of work, and they were trying to help us. They saw our need was pretty great, so they weren't able to help us this year with that. But we are, we've identified the problem and trying to work on how do we like consolidate routes, try to get students together on vans. Sometimes the issues are very complicated because their needs are complex, and we're not able to transport 2 kids together. So there's a lot of issues. But that is, so it's not, it is a little bit of inflation, but the inflation came in the cost that they were charging us to transport students. And I don't know if Pam or Adam's been working on transportation too.
Yeah, from a special education standpoint, and a lot of times those placements happen in relatively short amount of time. So you need to get that transportation up and running as quickly as possible. And again, with the lack of competition, you're sort of beholden to the providers that can do it. And there's just a limited amount of, unfortunately, of companies that are out there.
Eric, you wanted?
Yeah, just the number of students that we're talking about, can you come back around to that? Because we're talking about, these are special education out-of-district students, so it was like 10?
No, the 70.
70, okay.
But in addition to that, we have
Those-
students that actually get educated in Danvers, but they don't go to their home neighborhood school. They go to a specialized program in the district, so we have to transport them across town to that school.
And so you touched on my other question, thank you for letting me get a little bit of this. It's the number of students that are in, the number of students per trip is what I'm somewhat interested in. So, is it 1 or is it 5?
Oftentimes, it's 1 student per van.
And, many of these students that are going out also might require a monitor.
That was my
or
other
a nurse.
question. Do they
We have some
require a
students that
monitor?
would require a nurse for every trip, so it can be, again, even if it's in town, you may not be able to put multiple kids, let's say, in one van based on the nature of the needs of that student. So it's more, it's more complex than, as you get into it and you look at the needs, it can be harder to put together.
Understood. Thank you. Is that the same contract as our bus contract, or is it separate?
No, so that's a different, our contract is with Salter, that's a different, that increase, we budgeted for a 9%, they came back with a 16% proposed increase, and they were the only bid.
So for both of our transportation things, we got one bidded, one bid response?
Well, special education sort of is ongoing, I think is the way I'd describe it. You sort of, as new placements come on, you're working with, there's a couple of companies that are available, but the school buses, it was the one company. And so we work with Salter, who was recently purchased by NRT. So it's sort of a conglomerate. And then Beacon is the big company, and there's only a couple. You only see really like 3 names now in school buses, which makes it tough.
Don't hold your breath, it'll be down to 2 soon.
So,
Wally just wanted to jump in.
yeah, go ahead.
Some of these programs year-round?
There are, some of them are year-round. Yes, like a lot of them do provide summer services, so it's not, you're right, to your point, it's not 180 days, it's longer, it can be longer.
Thank you.
So is there a way for us to create competition in town, like with our own town vehicles and services? Like, I know, I'm sure some of them are highly specialized, like you said, but is there some low-hanging fruit here that we can try and take
Yeah,
on?
if you can find us a van driver, we will hire them right now. We've increased our wages.
What I would say, I mean, those conversations are ongoing. One of the things you're going to hear about when we talk about the senior social services budget is that we've actually, we have a grant-funded nutrition program. Historically, the meals would arrive in Danvers prepared, and our drivers would deliver them to homes. We've actually gotten out of that business because we can't find people to drive those vans, so now we're using a regional service to do that. I think if we could find the drivers, we would absolutely look at ways to do that, but it's a struggle. It's a struggle to find people who will drive those vehicles.
We increased our rate for recently, rate for van drivers, trying to hope to recruit more, but that still is not.
So on to the, just a broader topic of out-of-district placements, what percentage of the out-of-district placements are folks that migrate into the district with an out-of-district placement and really never set foot in the schools?
Let's see, yeah, so we get so we have 5 this year, 7 from last year, so, and then there are a couple other that had come previous years. I know 2 that are, and actually, yeah, 2 others that have come, so I only know of those, let's say, 14 that I know that it came to us with out-of-district placements that we had to honor.
And that's out.
It's just ironic that in the last month and a half, we had 2 additional.
What's the difference between out-of-district placements and parent placement?
It's called unilateral placements. Parents on their own, without going through our team process, decide to place their students in a private out-of-district placement, and then we work together to, we work on the team process to whether that student stays put in that placement or comes back to the Danvers Public Schools. It often
Why don't we
doesn't-
ask them to go through the regular process?
They can just make that decision. That the way the special education process works, parents can unilaterally place. Normally you'd have a team process where you'd have parents, teachers, all the key educators that sit around the table and work through that process. When that process doesn't go well, you can go to mediation, you can go to the Bureau of Special Ed Appeals. It's a highly regulated process in terms of each step. So there's not a lot of sort of room. The steps are very prescribed, and you get in big trouble if you don't follow them. So
Often they side with the parent placement.
Okay, thank you.
Is there a breakdown of the different places that we send people
Yeah.
by head count and by tuition?
I can get you that. I do have it here. Some of it's
Yeah.
if it's only
Yeah,
one
yeah.
student, we wouldn't tell you that, but if it's more than one student, we can give you those figures.
That would be,
Are those Chapter 766 schools that we're talking about? Okay.
We have some in like a public educational consortium, so like the North Shore Educational Consortium, where we actually, I was showing Dan earlier today on their annual report, we're the 3rd largest district user of their services out of like 15 districts on the North Shore. We're 3rd to Peabody and Salem. So we do they would be at a lower cost than the private out-of-district school placements, so.
so like, what are the biggest ones, the biggest categories of?
Of students going out or categories of schools that we place?
Either?
Yeah.
Right. We have, obviously, Landmark has has a few of our students. We have some residential students. Those would only be 1 at each placement, so I can't really say,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
we have Hopeful Journeys.
But residential, we can't really
Yeah,
replicate in.
yeah. Landmark, Hopeful Journeys are a big, New England Center, Millmark. The rest look like singletons, so I don't want to,
Right.
yeah. We have some students at as I was saying, we have our collaborative, the North Shore Educational Collaborative, but we also have students placed out at SEAM Collaborative. as our needs. Some of our students with high needs were trying to get placed. There was no room for them at the North Shore Collaborative, so we look at other public collaboratives to place. We try to place there before we place in private placements.
And then last question, out-of-district ones, are any of them in programs that we actually do offer in district? I know there's like, I think it's 3, they're supposed,
Yeah.
you have to support their current placement for a certain amount of time. Are
Yes.
there any that you think we have like appropriate levels of services in district that we can manage into the
Yeah,
district?
we started to build back our language-based program, and that's where it goes out to Landmark. So we're trying to, keep students in from going there and then offering that the students could come back. And then we're building that program. We have a certified reading teacher that has many of the certifications needed for a language-based classroom that we're moving into create that program at the middle school, because we have 3 students that will be moving up from 5th grade up to 6th grade next year.
Okay, I think that's it for me. Thank you.
Eric?
Just to piggyback on what Ted was asking, he stole a lot of my questions. For those out-of-district placements, how do we compare to other towns that maybe were up on that tax, that slide at the beginning? I know you might not be able to answer it now.
Yeah, no,
but-
I have a spreadsheet somewhere, not on this thing,
Okay.
but I could get you that information. We are a little bit on the higher end of having out-of-district placements, so that's why strengthening those programs in our district is going to be very important to keep kids in.
How quickly do we think that we'll be able to affect the bringing people back, or not outplacing as many students by spending the money this year?
Yeah, we're trying to do it. We started this year. We had some therapeutic classroom where there were 2 students that people were thinking might need to be placed out. It was coming up in January. They were talking to me about it at Holton Richmond, and we're working to place a teacher there instead. So right now we have a contracted person working there, but we have someone in the pipeline to hire and do that, because 2 out-of-district placements equals 1 salary
Yep.
of a teacher.
We have seen some initial success at the high school, bringing back some kids from the collaboratives. So, we feel like that's a good first place to start with, looking at bringing kids back. That's always a difficult choice for a family as well, as they're, if they've been in one placement for a long time, to make that change is obviously something that it's a big decision as well. So, but I think we've seen some early success with some of the programs.
To the
I guess
pri-
the
I'm sorry.
mindset really has to be that we want to educate our Danvers kids in our district. They have a right to go to school with their peers, and we need to work on the programming to have them be able to do that.
Do any of the private schools that we send out-of-district students to, do any of them offer a town's relief compared to individual tuition? And if not, is that something that we can ask?
I don't think, but we could look into that. I don't think that's not how they currently are operating. but
Package
it's not
deal
that.
kind of thing? More placements come, you get less tuition? I'm a
We might win on
negotiator
that
for a
game,
job,
yeah.
so, okay.
Every placement decision is an individualized decision that's gone through, that process, that IEP process, so.
Yeah,
it's-
but you
it's-
can always go back to the schools after the placements, right, September, and say, now we have 3 students, what kind of tuition break can you give us, right? Just something to look at. I noticed that substitutes, the costs are going down, or the budget's going down. Why is that? Because I know that we're short substitutes in most elementary schools.
Yeah, we've had, well, that's part
Yeah.
of the reason why it's going down, is because we're short, again, just like van drivers, teacher aides,
Okay.
substitute teachers are harder to get. We've contracted this year, and we've been very happy with ESS, our substitute company. They've provided quite a few substitutes, way over what we got from our other Kelly Services provider. So I think that, especially at the elementary level, the principals are quite happy with those services. So we're looking forward to. We were one of the first districts in the state of Massachusetts that ESS has. They're really a Midwest and Southern kind of company, so that we're looking forward. They are building and getting more districts on, but we were one of their first ones. So they really were able to build their base, and they were really eager to prove that they could get substitute teachers for us. So it was great.
That's good to hear. As far as behavioral issues go, we keep hearing that it's happening because of COVID, right? But we're out of COVID. Students are being educated in school, not at home. Are we seeing the numbers decrease, or are they rising? And when do we expect to see them decrease?
Yes. Yeah, we're working on that. Part of our ESSER funding is we put together behavior teams at each school. We have a student support aide, a behavior tech, social worker and the school principal are the team. We liken it to like the high school where you have assistant principals and a principal. At the elementary level, it was, you would just have a principal that used to do all the discipline and the working with behaviors. So to give the support to the principals of that team has been invaluable. And that is the team we're really working on to get those behaviors down. We're looking for some, more therapeutic help because some of the needs are greater than some of what our social workers can provide. So that is something that we are working with. We have a grant called for social emotional learning, and we're working with a company called Cartwheel to find therapists and have therapy for students. A lot of parents are having a hard time finding therapists on the outside, and this company provides that to our parents. And the therapy can happen outside of school, but it is something that we work to help families to get that. So we're just beginning that coming up, a pilot of that, and we're hoping to continue funding that through the next school year.
Thank you. As behavioral issues kind of level out, are we expecting to see SEL kind of decrease in the curriculum and maybe more education instead of SEL get added?
Our SEL time is about 25 minutes in each of our levels. Elementary is the first thing in the morning. Middle school, it's during the hawk block time during lunch, and then at the high school is the community block. So it's only 25 minutes of the time we devote to it. So we still think that right now that is what we need to do, and so that for the next few years we still have work to do on understanding how to socialize with each other. It's not just COVID, it is social media, and we're all communicating electronically instead of communicating face-to-face. And so teaching how to communicate face-to-face is a big issue that we face. And I think the community block has really been paying off, where kids are building relationships with students that you would normally not mix with at Danvers High School, and the same thing happening at the middle and elementary levels. So I think it's important.
I think my last question, I think you know where I'm going to go with
Yes,
it.
I do.
Is there any thought of advanced placement classes or programs at the elementary level as behavioral issues come up and classes are inclusive? It's not a bad thing. I think it's great for students. I think we can all argue we're not spending enough on special education, but I also don't think we're spending enough on the students that meet or exceed. And as we add more behavioral issues or challenge learning to the class, those kids are now, they're being impacted at a detriment to it. So is there any thought to add to it?
Yeah, we're, through what we call the multi-tier system of support, or MTSS work, we are working with teachers to do that, so that they not only work on students that need interventions or remediation, but to push those students. So we've had conversations about that. We do have a block of time. You had asked about that. We had what you called a win block at Smith School, which is what I need, and depending on what your need was, extension or remediation. We are working to put that back into the schedule. That when we blew up all the schedules in COVID, it was something that we put inside the reading and writing block, but teachers use it to meet the needs during the classroom time. And then what you're referring to is maybe something that goes across grade levels that were happening before, so that with that actual physical block happening, then that would have teachers do more of that kind of work.
That's good. Thank you. I also want to thank you all. Mrs. Wormers, you stepped up. You didn't have to. We thank you for that. So
I thank the team.
Mr.
I have a
Federico,
great
everybody
team.
else. Thank you.
Yeah.
Wally?
I don't have a lot more besides the special ed stuff. But I would like to thank you guys for both what you do in your Pathways program and the fact that you're growing that. I think that's huge, in addition to the academic, but beside the academic. So I would like to thank you for doing all that and carry on with that, please.
So I think, we really have about only 80% of our kids that go on to college, so that we have 20% of our students that we need to prepare for careers. And that would be those certificate programs that come out of a pathway are going to be key to that work.
Exactly. So thank you.
Eric?
Okay, I'll try and go quick. I appreciate you all have been standing up for quite some time. So I echo what my colleagues have said. That I think the information and what's not in the budget was, really an excellent slide. It was very helpful to see where your thinking is, even if it's not able to be included in the budget. That's very helpful to think about the long-term thinking, which is something that I think you've heard multiple times. I think that slide was excellent, and some of the stuff that I learned about the high school, the innovative pathways programs, and the staffing slide, I think those were really good to include. So my question, I'll start off with the out-of-district students, since we're up there. Any thought around, you probably have the analysis on attrition, kind of where the students are in their grades, and if there's any attrition relief that the district could look forward to? Any thought to that? So you mentioned, I think, students who are going from 5th to 6th grade, but if there's any projection along those lines that might be helpful in understanding where the costs are going, I think that would be good. You may not have it, I'm sure.
I have some of it. I think we look at like where kids are going. So we look at how many kids are in the population of Danvers and where are they choosing to go to school. Are they going to private school? Are they going to Essex Tech? Are they going to, there's a new charter school, Pioneer Valley, or math and science charter, I think, and they're going to be opening up right on the line of Peabody and Danvers. So we've seen a few students going there that we have, our homeschool has been holding steady, although I see, some students that have left for homeschool that probably, they left after COVID. They learned that it's comfortable there and went there. So I do know, we do have that data, and we've begun to analyze where they are going and what we can do to keep them in. And I think, I don't know if you all know that we've hired a new middle school principal, Adam Colantoni. He came from, he was a longtime principal of Wakefield, the middle school, Galvin Middle School, and currently working in Salem right now, Salem Public Schools. And I'm looking forward to him and bringing his ideas from when he was in Wakefield and Salem, and kind of knowing the programming and working with the students in there, and strengthening our middle school. And so that's to come. And then along with Dan Bauer, our new superintendent, I think that good things are going to be happening in Danvers.
Thank you. Let me also say I appreciate you referencing the website and public relations consultant. So, I think that's important that you recognize that. Any thought around, so in the nonprofit world, when we can't afford something, we get volunteers, right? So a committee or something like that, to having experts really spend time on it because you can't afford it, right? And so I don't know if you have considered something like that. I know you did say you had someone on the website side, but particularly the PR consultant might be a ripe opportunity for, a really qualified volunteer that recognizes what our need is. And I think that would be a good way to split the difference if you don't have the money.
Right.
But I also, let me say that, because I do recognize that I was quite passionate last year about the website, and you certainly have heard that. Mr. Chair, I don't know when it might be appropriate, but I do think that in support of the superintendent coming in, if the district wants to do that, that would be something that I would be in support of our finance committee supporting. So I don't know, I may be way out of order, but I just want to say.
The town manager is,
So I just want to say.
That's a perfect
Offered support.
segue. I was waiting at some point, I know not all committee members have had a chance to ask questions yet, but after the school committee had its conversation about the sort of the tug of war and the push and pull and making the budget work, Mary and I spoke the next morning. We funded the town's website overhaul through ARPA, and we've extended that same offer.
Okay.
We have the ability, if Mr. Sullivan and the consultant and the survey comes back and identifies investments to make either with the existing platform or even a new platform, we have the ability to support that, and we've made that clear.
Awesome.
And part of the discussion we had about the what's not in the budget slide, which you referenced, we're positioning the budget through the free cash, through the stabilization fund to weather what we think is coming. If the school department identifies opportunities in 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, where we can put some programming together quickly to try to keep kids or do something like that, we have some flexibility, and we obviously, we collaborate, we work together. So if we have to go to the school committee and the select board to tap into that, to stand something up in real time to try to address some of these, we'll do that. So.
If I could, Mr. Chair, with that too. It's of critical importance to our electric company that generates a phenomenal amount of money for this community, that we maintain a solid residential base of electric customer. And the easiest and best way to make sure that the town maintains that solid and best residential is to make sure our schools are well-funded. So I know it's not always the easiest thing to do, but perhaps we can look at some way, if we all agree that the websites for both the school and the town are of really, really significant importance from that end, that it would make sense for the electric light division to participate in that as well.
I don't think the DPU would appreciate that line.
We can,
But
let's,
I will say that we do have the resources available to upgrade.
Well,
Whatever the
let's,
schools need to do, we can support that.
we were able to do a lot of good stuff that the DPU allowed, and again, I think, I read that report too. And I think we've got some wiggle room that it might be worth looking into from that standpoint. And let's take advantage of the fact that we have some resources in the town that other places don't have and let people know that we can use them.
Duly noted.
So I'm going to condense, I got a whole lot up here, so I'll just narrow it down. Skip that one. What I was trying to find and I didn't find in the budget was really, how do we get grants, right? So is that just you all writing the grants?
Yeah.
And so,
And-
do you know, how much are you able to bring in? So I'm looking for, so
Oh,
again, in the nonprofit world, that cost-benefit analysis. What does it cost to bring in X amount of money? And is there a way to help you all do more of that?
Yeah, we got about, we're on a skeleton crew this year, so we have about $350,000 worth of grants. And we got them, by writing for the Department of Education grants. They're competitive, but if you write a good grant, then you get funded through
right.
them. So we did that. So we got one for, the big one was from social emotional learning. We also got hate crime grant, early college, and then some of the math innovation program grants.
And then really my last question, I think you touched on a little bit, was looking at the standard, not the SPED, but the standard bus contract and looking down the road, any thoughts on what might be done? You don't have to offer them up, but I think it would be prudent to look ahead with what might be done to just get control of those costs, because certainly we, being held to the monopoly, I mean, it is quite a difficult position to be in.
A difficult position, yes.
So, and that doesn't mean doing our own, because
Right.
that's a whole nother piece,
Yeah,
trying
no,
to find.
actually, I have to say, I think the hybrids worked well for Danvers, that we have some of our own buses, and which are more stable with the drivers and everything, and to have half contracted out. So when we have had to go down, some parents know that we've had to condense some bus routes when a driver's sick or something like that. We've been able to minimize that impact on the district, because we do have a very stable bus system here in Danvers, so.
So again, I just want to say thank you, really appreciate all that hard work during difficult times, and welcome to the new superintendent. So thank you all very much.
So, I'll try to be kind of short, because I kind of feel for you, being in that position for a long time.
You've been on this side.
I have been on that side. No, but I think that, first of all, I want to say, I appreciate the presentation for all four of you. You really focused on really what the important parts of the budget that are really driving everything, and we really explained things well. I also want to say that I don't necessarily agree with Ted's analysis of the breakdown of elementary class sizes, because it's been pretty similar throughout the last 15 years. In fact, it's better than it was a few years ago. However, yeah, it's better than it was a few years ago. But I will say that I do wonder why Smith has only 330-something and Highlands has 380-something. Like that, Smith is built to take people.
Right.
And I think we need to use the space,
Right.
because, to the extent that there's a little bit too much in one school, it is Highlands. And so just something to think about.
Yeah, we might have to rethink the flex zones.
Yeah,
'cause
I mean,
that's what
absolutely.
keeps- Yeah.
So I'm not so much thinking of Great Oak, I'm thinking of Smith, because
Yeah.
Smith's not that far from the other schools
know.
either. So what what concerns me is, and again, I think everybody's done a great job working with this budget this year. I mean, obviously. What concerns me, before I ask that, the increase in the, actually, I feel bad, talking about this in some respects, because we're talking about this in numbers, and I mean, these are kids, and the kids need whatever they need, and they need to get it, and so it has to be paid for. And so that's not lost on me. And so whatever it is, it is. But, we're talking about the budget right now, and the uptick the last couple of years, is it a similar, like, are there kids that are being outplaced? Are they, because it's never been like this since 2007 when I've been involved. And is it mostly one type of a situation, or what is driving the increase?
Right. I think the bigger increase we've seen is in the behaviors, some extreme behaviors that we've had to, that we have not been able to, to meet their challenges in our programming. So we've had to have them be placed out of district. Although I know some of them are in, some students we try to keep in as much. As I said, at Holton Richmond, we created a program to try to keep students in. So, but then working with those students and keeping them and getting them to the general education stream costs, because we need to have a teacher aide that goes with them. So, it's just building that programming to keep them. But I think that over the last 2 years, some of the behaviors have increased.
Yeah, and so that, I thought that might be the case, and that concerns me because I don't necessarily know that you're going to be able to keep a lot of those kids. And I particularly am concerned about it when I look at both what's not in the budget and what ESSER's paying for, because a lot of that stuff is social workers, special ed teachers, autism. The ESSER things are special ed coordinators, student support, reading. I mean, these are things that are really important to have. So I know why you had to do what you had to do this year, but over the long term, it's not good, because we need to have, we're going to have programs and we're going to build programs, and for as long as I've been involved, we're always trying to build programs, and it's not easy to build programs. And you're also dealing with parents who if there's a specialized school, they're probably going to do something a little bit better than a program that we build, because we only have so many resources. So it's hard to get the parents to buy in. And again, that we need to do what the kids need.
Right.
So I'm concerned that going forward, that this is going to be like it is for the next few years, and we're going to be looking at big numbers.
Yeah.
And I mean, I know Lynn, the new special ed director, is good, and she knows what she's doing, but it's very hard to build these programs, and especially if you don't have the resources to build the programs, and I'm concerned about that.
Yeah, you've brought something to mind that we haven't mentioned, that we're bringing consultants in from the outside to help us build those programs. So someone that has actually worked for families to help them find out-of-district programs for language-based is actually working with us as we're building our program. So that's someone that would be advocating for an out-of-district placement, showing how to build the program so that the kids will stay in. So that's on the language-based side. We have a BCBA that's highly trained that consults in many school districts that is helping us at Holton Richmond right now, building the therapeutic program to help us think about what is needed there. And then I also have someone working with us, and we're luckily funding a lot of these people off grants that I have, the federal grants. I also have someone coming in from the outside that was a special ed director in Boston, coming to help me, and Lynn O'Neill, working with our new special ed coordinators, because they're new positions. How do we work well together as a team, and how do we work well to build those programs? So we're kind of looking for that outside help, so it's not just like Danvers trying to do the Danvers work and getting that.
No, and that's great, because I think you have to look at all kinds of different resources in order to, it's going to be a major issue over the next few years, and as Mike pointed out, the ESSER funds are going away.
Right.
And we're going to be dealing with this, and we're not always going to have extra money to throw at this stuff. So, but we still have to build the programs, and you do need resources for that. So, I think you've done a great job, along with the town and everybody working together to deal with this budget this year. And I know you're working really hard. I mean, I know you guys do that, and but I just think there's going to be a lot of work to go over the next few years. And Dan, that's going to be one of your major jobs.
We're hoping for
so-
some relief from the state, because when we get the relief from the state, then we can shift some of the ESSER funds back to where
Yes,
they were.
it's all on Sally, and we expect Sally to solve the
Ways and
problem.
means, it's all about the ways and means.
But again, Eric, you want to?
Well, something occurred to me as you're talking about the long-term problem, which is, yeah, we're a Danvers School Committee, Danvers Finance Committee, and we're looking at our monies and our budget. But the fact is, this is, a global problem throughout the state, throughout the country. And what schools are dealing with now is part of the fallout of the overall lack of mental health services that are available, not just in schools, but throughout the state in hospitals. How many students, and I'm very familiar with this, how many young people end up in an emergency room for multiple days or even weeks, waiting for a placement to get the mental health services they need. And when those students go through that process and they come back to the school, yes, we have the Therapeutic Learning Center, which we hope will help. But the fact is, this is a universal social problem that has developed because of COVID and because of other things. And really, the solutions have to be universal at the state level, the federal level. I mean, the federal government initially was supposed to provide 40% of the funding for special education costs when it was first passed. I don't know that they've ever hit 20% in the last 30 or 40 years since the special education on the federal level, I think it's IDEA, came to be. This is a statewide and a nationwide problem. The mental health of our students is at risk, and we need a global solution as well as doing what we can do on the local level.
Totally agree. Obviously, all we can talk about is how we can do what we can do.
Understood.
But
Understood.
I agree with that. Let me just ask one more thing, and it's just going back to the transportation thing. How many of the placements of the 70 are actually just one person per place?
Yeah, it'll take a minute to. We're probably gonna have to get you that information.
That's okay. You can get it
A
from
lot
me.
of the other
I know
districts are
it's,
singletons, so.
no, I know it's a lot. I know it's a
So at least
decent
7,
size.
and then district transportation.
Yeah. Okay, no, that's fine. Just, all right, again, I appreciate everything you guys have done, and again, working with the town, and keep at it. Thank you.
Thanks, Arthur. Questions from the audience? Mr. Morose?
Get the chair's attention.
Jim Rose, Precinct 3, town meeting member. It was just struck me there on these incidents. I mean, these issues of behavior. I mean, are they part of the 644 IEPs, or are they something totally different? And so, do we keep track of any of these issues or incidents as they happen? I mean, how many are there? 5 a week, 10 a week? I mean, how, and it's hard to make decisions and see what we're doing if we don't have these numbers. And it's the same thing with some of the bullying issues. I mean, we need to somehow have numbers to make decisions when they're reported.
So each school, I mean, Adam can talk about this, but each school keeps data on the behaviors. For example, if you're in a therapeutic classroom, data's taken all the time. It's taken all day, every day, so we can see the trends of how the behavior is and how our interventions are working with them. And then if they're not working, then we try new strategies to work with them. So that kind of is done there. But then as far as like the bullying and everything, any kind of behaviors that happen in the school, the principals have logs that they keep track of, and then the state, if the behaviors are such that the suspension is required, then that data is recorded at the Department of Education.
Other questions? Paul, did you want to follow up with something?
Yeah, I'm just concerned that, this is probably directed to the school committee. I think I've talked with Eric about this before and other folks. I was on the building committee for the Smith School, and I think MSBA required, had to build a school for, I'm gonna say, roughly 452 students, give or take. Or we wouldn't get the type of funding we wanted. Now, that school's been in session, open for, it's gonna finish its second year. And I'm looking at these numbers here, and they only have 339 kids in that class, in that school, and that school only held, before we tore it down, 301 or 2 at max. I don't know how you get there, but something has to be done, and it may have to be that everybody just can't have a neighborhood school, or there's gonna have to be some way that those boundaries move. I don't know how you do it, and I don't know if we've been reluctant to do it, but that school, in my humble estimation, should have more children in it at this point. I don't believe in any way, shape, or form that Highland should have 386 children, and Smith, after 2 years, which should hold 452 students, only has 339 students. Again, I'm puzzled, and I'll follow up with this. Well, first of all, Eric, go ahead.
Well, how you do
Do you,
it,
Mr. Chair?
Paul, is that you redistrict. And redistricting, redrawing all of the lines,
Right.
moving students around from school to school. So you take a student who's been in, say they've gone K through 4 in one school, and now they're gonna do their 5th grade in another school.
Right.
Could you do it? Certainly. Is it the third rail in terms of how parents feel about that? Absolutely. It would take probably several years of public hearings and everything else to get it done. Yes, you could do it, but it is disruptive for families, disruptive for the district, and would take a long time to accomplish. Doesn't mean we can't do it. We've tried to deal with these flex zones as a way of looking for natural ways to move students around without moving them too far, or start students in the right schools. But yeah, you can do it. It's a bear.
We've talked about it. You and I have talked about it,
Yeah,
because
it's
I've
a-
asked you the question.
Yeah, it's a bear, but you
Yep.
can do it.
But if you brought children in, let's say they start, a family moves into a district that would say, okay, they're really going into the Highland School.
Yep.
But then, however you did that, made that boundary, you say, all right, this family's gonna start at Smith. So I totally agree with you. You're not gonna take a child that's gone K through 4 and pull him out of that school when he's entering grade 5.
Right.
That's looking for the fight you don't want.
What
But-
you have just described, Paul, is the flex zone.
Well,
where-
it doesn't seem to be working. That's the problem at this point, maybe. Maybe it needs more time, but if you get a family in and they're anywhere near,
Right.
it's almost like you have to start doing the redistricting at some point. So when the new folks move into that district, they're going into that bigger school.
But again, that's sort of what the flex zone accomplishes. I get what you're saying. It's not moving the needle as much as you'd like to see.
We're not moving fast
But-
enough for.
And again, you can't, when you're redistricting or even with the flex zone, you've got to be sensible, because if you start moving someone who,
Right.
you can't say someone who's a Smith or a neighbor that goes to Smith now is going to go to Riverside next year, because now you have implicated buses and everything else. So the point is, it's tricky, it can be done, but we're hoping to use the flex zones to equal things as much as possible.
Can I just
But,
add to that? It's, I mean, you look at the problem you have now, and the real problem right now is Highlands, and the obvious answer is Smith.
Yeah.
So you adjust your flex zones for incoming students, obviously, because we've talked about this over the years.
Yeah.
But I think that effort should be made, because Highlands does have too many kids. And
Sure.
I'm sorry, Highlands has too many kids. And really, as Paul said, Smith was built for 450 some odd students. So, I mean, your answer's there. You can't move them unless the kids or the families wanted to move.
Right.
You can't move them once they're already in the school. But you certainly can do it as you're bringing in the new families.
Yeah, and I think, again, that's what the.
Right now, we don't even allow people, if somebody raised their hand, they would be politely told no.
Yeah, and
We
that
don't
should,
even ask for volunteers.
that should be considered
That's
too.
problematic.
Can I,
Yeah.
Mr. Chair?
Someone who wants to move from, You
Could
know,
I-
in other words, voluntarily from Highlands to Smith. You know, again, that would work in some instances. The question is, then you end up with a lottery, and it's possible.
Yeah, but if we sat around and spitballed the hypotheticals and gamed it out and spent I think we could figure out a decent
Yeah, I don't-
first cut at a policy in hours, not days. It wouldn't be that
If
hard.
I can, Mr.
Go ahead,
Chair.
Mike.
Yeah.
I have no doubt that our new superintendent can count. And I believe he can probably count to 5, which is all he needs to with us. You've heard at least 5 of us say a huge issue that this board wants you to address is the inequity in the number of kids in the schools. And we can leave it at that.
Now you're quoting Dan Toomey.
Good one to quote in this room.
I think, I didn't mean to bring up a hornet's nest and stir that nest again. But let me ask you one other question. This is not anybody, Eric. This is just, what was when we did the Danvers High School over again, I'm not gonna say built it, because we didn't really build the whole thing, but was the enrollment to be around 1,200? Is that a number that we, were throwing around 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago?
11, maybe?
1150 is what I remember.
1150, so we're looking at 781 now, if I'm looking at page number 2, E2. I think we're looking at 781 is what's at the high school now, and I'm trying to look at these numbers for 9, 10, 11, and 12, which is our projected enrollment from the 23-24 year, which we're not in yet, we're going to that year. And I look at these numbers, and I know this can't be right because no one's talking about it. For his final numbers are 915 for the class year of 2023, 24. And we're hoping we're over 800, I think, is what you talked about, Adam. So they must be looking at, when those children come from grade 8, we're going to lose a certain number of them regardless of where they go. But we're still optimistic that we can get into the 800 and 800 plus. Is that correct?
We're hoping to get to 800. The 915, is that from the old, like, NESDEC?
The projection just rolls the 8th grade up to 9th grade.
It's just that then it's going to happen.
So that's probably using 279 or whatever the 8th grade number is,
Right.
which we know is too high.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that number's not the right number. That's the current 9th grade.
So I can't add to 5, Mr. Superintendent, according to this guy.
Football coach.
Let it go, okay? But I'm hoping we get there, I really do. But I think in reality, we know we're going to lose some
Of course, we're
at the
gonna
high
lose some.
school. Right,
Yeah,
but-
I mean, enrollment didn't decline overnight, and we're not gonna rebuild it overnight.
Yeah.
But we're committed. I think we have a really good plan in terms of needs that we need to address, information we need to share. So I feel like in year 2, we've made headway. We've radically changed the way we do interactions with the middle school, with elementary school, with the community. That's gonna take time to rebuild, but we're committed to it, and I think we have a good plan to work on that.
And one last quick one, I think you can answer. Is the fee schedule going to stay the same?
We're looking at all the fee schedules for next year.
But you haven't made a decision yet.
Not yet.
So what we get in this report, it could
That's
change.
those are the current fees.
Right, but they could change then.
Absolutely.
Okay. Try to keep them down. All right, because I'll tell you what, boy, it really adds up.
I'd like to have no fees,
Right, oh, I would too.
ideally.
I hate to say it, but back in the day when I was, forget it. Forget it.
Thank you.
That's it for me. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Anything else from the audience? Anything else from the committee? Is there a motion?
Move to accept the school budget as requested.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you very much.
Thank you, we appreciate the support.
Thank you.
We're going to take a 5-minute break, which if we can really keep to 10 minutes, I would appreciate. And then we will.
We have 10 minutes of budgets left.
And then then we'll come back to the riveting general government budgets that I know everyone's here looking
Wait till
forward
we
to.
ask for more money in the finance committee reserve.
He always seems to.
Paul's not allowed to have any.
No, I'm off that.
He'll be up all night.
Arthur probably needs something.
Panini or Danvers pieces?
Like to get Daniela's and
All right, welcome back, everyone. Steve, moving into the management budgets.
Go from a $48 million budget to a $360,000 budget. Page
24,
25 in your
23.
budget book, 24 and 25.
Number
This
one
is
in your-
the operating budget for the town manager's office. Salaries for the executive secretary and the procurement specialist are paid out of this account. As noted on the screen and in the budget book, the big budget buster this year in the management budget is an increase in postage rates, so that's reflected in the budget. Happy to answer any questions.
Paul, we'll start with you.
Paul says he's not answering any more questions. Nor am I.
We're talking about the moderator?
Nope.
No, he said 20, what page?
Page
is it?
26, 25.
26.
And-
Starts on
26?
25, the budget numbers are on 26.
I see, management, page 26. Am I correct in that? Yeah, okay, just bear with me a second. No questions. Took me a while to get to the...
That was riveting. Probably the best
Sorry.
television DCAT's had in a while.
I wanted to get, let Mike go.
Go ahead, Mike.
Certainly better than any of Zubrick shows, that's for sure.
Oh, okay.
Nothing.
I have no questions.
I'm good, thank you.
I have no questions.
So, no. Let me just say, I appreciate all the strategic Danvers activity that's been going on. I've gone to some, and it's been really, really nice. So that's it.
Arthur?
All set.
Any questions from the audience?
Bill Bates, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 4. Is there any way we could more expeditiously distribute the town report? I looked at that, that's probably going out to all 149 town meeting members, was about $1,500 to mail that town report, you know, and I know we've had trouble in the years before. They gave the manager a hard time for saying, we just got it tonight at town meeting. They used to give them out at town meeting when we got there. And some people said, wow, how can I vote on this? I just got it tonight. But maybe even perhaps we could send an email to town meeting members and say, come down and pick it up. And maybe we can help offset that postage increase that we keep looking at. Thank you.
Thank you for that suggestion, Bill. Anything else from the audience? Oh, Bill, I didn't see you
Bill's
over
here.
there.
In the lounge.
I saw him. I saw him.
Bill Bradstreet, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 1, to follow up on his suggestion. There used to be, the department I worked for used to deliver some of these reports to save money. As he said, can't we find out who needs these reports and see if they are willing to or have the ability to receive the report electronically, either print it out on their own, which is expensive, or merely read it and make notes. I was handed a report in here, and I'm not trying to malign anybody. I was handed a report so the town could save money. I don't mind that. I appreciate that, but there has to be a better way of getting the information that certainly the town meeting members can get what they need to make a decision. It has to be a better way, cost-wise. That's only talking about, there are other ways, I'm sure, that can be thought about how to save money, but as far as us getting reports, make a list, come in and pick it up yourself. If you have to mail it, get somebody to drop it off. You could do that on your way home at night. Just a suggestion.
Thanks, Bill. Is there a motion?
Move the budget.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
The second budget that we'll go through under management is the department head's budget. If you turn to page 29 in your budget booklet, you will see a breakout of the department head positions that are funded in the department head budget. The increase this year includes the normal funding for the management compensation plan, which is the performance evaluation plan that was created by town meeting in 1979 and the select board votes on every fall. It also includes an amount to cover the comp and class study that is currently underway. We did a comp and class study for our non-union positions, so kind of a step back for the newer members. We negotiate every 3 years. We negotiate with our 7 collective bargaining agreements. As part of that process, we often do salary and wage studies across the region and with our peers. But for the non-union employees who work in town, and we have about 60 of them, the last time a comp and class study had been done prior to 2017 was in 2001. So we're trying to get into the cycle now every 5 years or so of having a third party evaluate the pay scales and the job classifications for the non-union employees. And the timing works out such that we decided this year to include some funding here so that if a number of those 60 positions come back, and we expect a lot of them to be sort of on scale where they should be, but we know we're anticipating that we will have some that are off scale. This gives us somewhere during the year to make those adjustments that are required for the non-union employees across all of our departments. Happy to take any questions.
Good. Arthur?
I'm all set.
Eric?
Nothing.
Well, great. Any questions from the audience?
Oh, no, sorry.
I didn't see you. I didn't see.
Well, no. So what? So we have a single year 14% increase for our management team. How much of that is How much of that is something other than just yearly salary increases?
Yeah, the majority of that, anything beyond the standard 4% is the carry for the comp and class study. So that would be funding available to make adjustments for up to 60 different positions. And we don't anticipate 60 positions, but we're carrying funds there, Mike. And
Yeah.
if what will happen later in the year is if, I'm just making this up, for example, if 4 members of the business office turn out that we may be doing a budget transfer this time next year from the department head budget to whatever department those adjustments were made for.
Okay,
So this is not just for the 9 positions.
Yeah, so-
This would cover 60 positions.
So rather than trying to break the potential out within each one of those departments, you're going to keep it in a singular, and then if we, okay.
Yep.
Thanks.
Paul?
No question.
Okay. Nothing from the audience? Is there a motion?
Move the budget.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
Turn to page 23, our legal counsel budget. You'll see the $99,000 line item is to cover legal expenses that pertain to the general fund. We do budget legal services separately in our utilities, and those costs are covered directly by the utilities for their needs. Murphy, Hesse, Toomey, Lehane is the firm that has represented the town for many years for general counsel, labor, tax. Electric does retain the services of KP Law for some legal work that is specific to the electric utilities. So the budget, the legal services for water, sewer, and electric get voted as part of their operating budgets that we'll review tomorrow night. The $99,000 is for all other departments.
Great. Any questions from anyone?
Just, not that I have a problem with, obviously, with our legal services in this, but have we done sort of a internal analysis of whether or not we could get those services from another firm in a...
We know that...
My guess is no, and probably it would be more expensive, but...
I should turn the microphone off when I say it. When Murphy Hesse bids for new clients, they're about $75 an hour higher than what they charge. We were the first municipal client that they had. Our rates are still well below market.
What are their hourly rates? I'm just curious.
Off the top of my head, I
Okay.
don't have that.
Bill?
Should we say right before, no, we can't send somebody to the Board of Appeals to be able to act as the attorney? It would be too expensive?
Are you you're anticipating my question. We pay for a lawyer, I find it disappointing if I go to a meeting and the applicant is citing the law, and we don't have someone there to either cite the law the way we interpret it, we have to ask for an opinion later on. I just am disappointed. I know we don't have a bottomless pit of money to pay for these things, but just, it disappoints me that we can't figure out a way to have some legal representation. And again, not relying on an applicant, because if there are 100 things, they'll tell you the one or two that benefit them, and they won't tell you the other 90-some odd that don't benefit them. I just find it very disappointing. I know it's money, I just find it very disappointing.
Thank you for sharing your disappointment. Is there
I
anything
can't
else?
be the only one that feels that way.
No,
No, you're not.
Well, I would tell you this, if I could, Mr. Chair. The question was just asked what their hourly rate is. They get the hourly rate if they show up and they sit there for 3 hours and do nothing. If I show up at a court hearing for my client and I don't have to really do anything, I don't say, oh, that's okay, I'm going to give you a break. The truth is that we're probably paying them somewhere between $400 and $500 an hour. So for every one of these meetings that you want a town council to be there, an attorney to be there, you're probably talking $1,500 a meeting. So it's not just a little bit of money, it's a substantial amount of money. And the process that we've always had in this community, which is to try to funnel questions to the legal counsel to be able to reduce that amount, is what keeps it at $99,000 as opposed to $200,000.
I don't have a bottomless, I just find it disappointing. I'm sorry. It's the dollar amount, that's the bottom line. I understand that. I just find it very disappointing.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there a motion?
Move the amount.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
Next two budgets are moderator and select board. Those are on page 23 in the budget, and those are level funded. Happy to take any questions folks have.
Any questions from the board on the moderator budget? Questions from the audience? Is there a motion?
Move the budget.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. And the select, we were doing.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yep, that's all right. We got to do them one at a time. And the select board, any questions? Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
And rounding things out tonight, we have the Finance Committee Reserve. And for those who are new, I'll just say this is, state law allows towns to set aside a certain amount of money each year to be used at the discretion of the Finance Committee. That amount is, it is a percentage of something, and I don't have it memorized because I've never had a reason to know it, but it's in the millions. I believe that whatever the formula is, the Finance Committee Reserve in Danvers could be, I want to say north of $4 million. It's always been a very nominal amount. I think at times it has been higher depending on the policy will of the bodies. We've used it sparingly in the past. I think when I first started, it had been used to fund the recruitment process for the town manager. We've used it in the past, as is noted here, for small transfers for health insurance. But it's a funding source that the Finance Committee can access during the budget year. And the idea is that almost all dollars in town form of government are appropriated by a town meeting. There are times when we don't need to convene all 144 town meeting members to allocate small amounts, and this gives us an avenue to bring the Finance Committee together to appropriate small amounts. In this case, we're recommending level funding of $125,000.
Thank you. Any questions?
I understand what you're saying, but I think we've over the last few years, we've been asked to do this more often than I can remember. And I think, was it one of the last couple of years, we pretty much expended almost the entire amount, right, when we were dealing with the computer transfer, when Colby was in front of us. Was that last year or the year before?
A couple of years ago, yeah.
I mean, it doesn't really hurt to put, I mean, obviously, I know you look at these recommendations quite, strenuously in terms of it, but if we don't spend it, it simply goes back into the free cash, and it's just a shuffle from that standpoint. Is there any reason that we wouldn't want to increase it to $200,000 just in case?
So at this point, you'd have to offset it somewhere else.
Okay.
But yes, you could adjust it upward. There was a year, I believe, portion of the Essex Tech assessment was funded here.
Yeah.
That might have been the year going into COVID when the town reduced its budget, and they didn't, and the finance committee said, we're gonna set that aside
Yep.
in anticipation of cuts,
yeah.
but ultimately, we make that payment.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's an opportunity to adjust that if there's an offsetting adjustment elsewhere.
And in the future, if we did raise it, it would still sit in an account earning interest, right?
Nominal, it'd probably be in an MDT account.
Would it be different than if it were in the general? Like, is there an cash interest impact to the town by allocating cash from where it would otherwise be to this fund?
Through you, Mr. Chair, all of these funds for the, excuse me, the operating budgets, usually in a vendor account, which is earning basically zero interest.
Even now?
We have pockets of money in MMDT, which the interest rate's over 4%, but, so to answer your question, any money that the treasurer puts in an interest-bearing account that she doesn't need to make weekly payroll and vendor payments, whether it's in FinCom reserve or it's in another line item, it would be in the same, either vendor account or an interest-bearing account.
Okay. I support Mike's idea. We should do it in the future.
Anything else? Is there a motion?
Move to accept the number.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That's it for this evening. We'll reconvene tomorrow at 7 PM in this room.
See you then.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Good night.
It's early.